Chapter 637. The Sword Immortal ascended Yujing Mountain with mixed feelings. The relationship between the Heavenly Sword Sect and Xianmen Tianzong was a little awkward. The low-level cultivators of the Heavenly Sword Sect might not know, but as a core elder, the Sword Immortal clearly knew that behind his sect stood the conservative faction of the Taishu Temple. The Heavenly Sword Sect could rise strongly and occupy the second position in the Nine Heavens Sword League, second only to the Shushan Sword Sect. At the same time, it also became the second holy land of swordsmanship in the world. In addition to their own continuous development, the support of the Taishu Temple played a great role. The Taishu Temple needed the existence of a force within the Nine Heavens Sword League to restrain the Shushan Sword Sect. It did not need to be too strong, but at least to ensure that the Nine Heavens Sword League was not unified. Since ancient times, the Shushan Sword Sect had always had the opinion of unifying the entire Nine Heavens Sword League. It was also because of the support of the Taishu Temple that the Shushan Sword Sect had always tolerated such a rebel. The younger generation of Shushan cultivators looked down on the Heavenly Sword Sect, thinking that they could not compete with their own sect. In fact, they were all wondering why the high-level masters of the sect would allow the existence of such a swordsmanship sect that challenged their authority. But the primordial spirit big shots of Shushan also knew that the Heavenly Sword Sect was actually the spokesperson of the Taishu Temple in the Nine Heavens Sword League, just like the Sun Moon Sword Sect was the spokesperson of the Great Qin Dynasty, and the Songhai Sword Sect was the spokesperson of the Great Zhou Dynasty. At the beginning, the relationship between the Heavenly Sword Sect and Xianmen Tianzong was actually good. Especially after the Tianjia Peak sword trials, the relationship between the two sides became even closer. But after the Battle of West Hill City, Lin Feng united the Great Zhou, the Great Qin, the Purple Cloud Dao, the Northern Militant Royal Court, and other forces to stand on the same side and oppose the Taishu Temple. The Heavenly Sword Sect was caught between the two sides and became awkward. Although the Heavenly Sword Sect did not express hostility, and Xianmen Tianzong did not really see it as a vassal of the Taishu Temple, the relationship between the two sides instantly cooled down. Speaking of which, this was something that Lin Feng felt regretful about. However, everything had its pros and cons. As long as the pros outweighed the cons, it was fine. Therefore, Old Sword Immortal's visit this time was a little uncertain. If it was before the Battle of West Hill City, based on the relationship between the Heavenly Sword Sect and the Celestial Sect of Xian Gate, the Dark Light Meteoric Iron in the Mystic Heaven Realm would be supplied to the Celestial Sect of Xian Gate. As an ally, the Heavenly Sword Sect would definitely be the best choice if they wanted to sell it. But now the situation is very hard to say, so Old Sword Immortal specially stayed in the Kunlun Mountains area for a period of time, waiting for the big shots of the other sword sects to arrive, and then he will first carry out a negotiation, discussing and coming to an agreement. Then they will join forces and pay a visit to Lin Feng. With the strength that Lin Feng had displayed at the moment, in the entire Divine Land, only the Taishu Temple, the Shushan Sword Sect, the Great Qin Dynasty, and the Great Zhou Dynasty could truly negotiate with him on an equal footing. If the Reincarnation Sect could produce a powerful supergiant, who could unify the 6 paths of reincarnation, and restore the power of the Reincarnation Sect when Taoist reincarnation was still alive, then they could barely be considered the 5th sect. Other than that, even forces like the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Northern Militant Royal Court, the Purple Cloud Dao, and the Songhai Sword Sect would not have the confidence to face Lin Feng alone. Even if these forces joined forces, they still did not have the confidence to face Lin Feng. Old Sword Immortal and the others were thinking about how to fight for the best conditions in the negotiations while climbing the mountain to visit Lin Feng. Who knew that Lin Feng would play Tai Chi with their visit? It was just a casual chat, and once it came to specific matters, he would change the topic. Old Sword Immortal and the others were anxious, but they could not force Lin Feng to directly respond, so they could only deal with it gloomily. Could it be that someone has already taken the lead? Old Sword Immortal's thoughts spun rapidly. Who could it be? The Blaze Sword Sect has always followed closely behind Shushan. It can't be them. The Songhai Sword Sect is one with the Great Zhou Dynasty. The Sun Moon Sword Sect is one with the Great Qin Dynasty. It's all possible. The Celeritas Sword Sect has already completely separated from Shushan, and they also do not attach themselves to other large forces. Could it be that they chose to board the ship of Xianmen Tianzong? The few great sword cultivators were continuously guessing in their hearts. Seeing the situation, Lin Feng did not interrupt them, saying with a smile, "In the Xianmen realm, our sect has indeed discovered dark light meteoric iron, but the mine's environment is complex, and we still need some time to explore. I also need to wait for the disciples to report back. Fellow cultivators, please don't be impatient." What could Old Sword Immortal and the others say at this time? They could only nod their heads helplessly. After sending them down the mountain, and temporarily settling them on the cloud peak, Lin Feng sat in the All Heavens Hall. After a while, two figures reappeared in the hall. One of them was a middle-aged man in yellow with a calm expression, emitting a strong wave of power. He was the current sect master of the Wilderness Sword Sect, Sword Venerable of the Wilderness. The other was an old man in black with a blue thunderbolt pattern on his lapel. His beard and hair were all fluttering, and he looked extremely powerful. He was the current sect master of the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt. Both of them left and returned. After seeing each other, they glanced at each other and slightly nodded their heads in greeting. Then they turned their heads to look at Lin Feng together. "Sect Master Lin, do you have something to say to us by asking us to stay?" Lin Feng smiled. Just now, he was the one who secretly transmitted his voice, asking them to return. "Sword Venerable of the Wilderness, please wait a moment." Lin Feng nodded at Sword Venerable of the Wilderness, then he looked at Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt and said lightly, "The dark light meteoric iron is produced in the Xiantian realm. The Thunderbolt Sword Sect and another sect will have priority in supplying it. What do you think?" Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt's pupils shrank slightly. The Thunderbolt Sword Sect had always been on good terms with the Sky Sword Sect in the Nine Heaven Sword Alliance. They were not the vassals of the Sky Sword Sect, but they were allies. Most of the time, they advanced and retreated together in the Nine Heaven Sword Alliance. What Lin Feng was doing was equivalent to asking the Thunderbolt Sword Sect to get rid of the Sky Sword Sect. Not long ago, Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt had reached an agreement with Old Sword Immortal to cooperate with Xianmen Tianzong. The Thunderbolt Sword Sect, the Sky Sword Sect, the Wilderness Sword Sect, and the Constellation Sword Sect had joined forces to fight for the Dark Light Meteoric Iron. Now, the Thunderbolt Sword Sect would obviously benefit from Lin Feng's offer. However, once they accepted Lin Feng's offer, it would be equivalent to parting ways with the Sky Sword Sect. In other words, they would be parting ways with the Taishu Temple. The relationship between the Sky Sword Sect and the Taishu Temple was too close. They had obtained a lot of resources and benefits from the Taishu Temple, and had gradually become one with the Taishu Temple. It was impossible for them to get off the ship at the last minute and change to Xianmen Tianzong's ship. However, the Thunderbolt Sword Sect was different. The alliance with the Sky Sword Sect was just an alliance of benefits and mutual benefits. They could change sides at any time. The only problem was how to choose and whether it was worth it. Silently, Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt looked at Lin Feng. In the Battle of West Hill City, Xianmen Tianzong, or rather Lin Feng himself, had shown great strength. He had even plotted to overthrow the Taishu Temple. However, could he really succeed in the end? Naturally, some dark light meteoric iron would not make the Thunderbolt Sword Sect change sides and stand on the opposite side of the Taishu Temple. Both Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt and Lin Feng did not think so. Today was just the beginning and a signal. Lin Feng had extended an olive branch. It depended on whether Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt dared to take the gamble. After a long silence, Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt suddenly asked, "Sect Leader Lin, apart from the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, who is the other party?" It could not be the Wilderness Sword Sect. Otherwise, Lin Feng would have made it clear. Lin Feng glanced at Sword Venerable of the Wilderness, smiled slightly, and did not speak. At this moment, a third figure appeared in the hall. It was a middle-aged man with a jade-like face and black hair that was like a waterfall. He looked to be in his 40s, with only 2 strands of snow-white hair hanging down from the sides of his temples. His eyes were full of majesty. Celeritas Sword Sect's sect leader, Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt. Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt came to a realization. The Celeritas Sword Sect has indeed boarded the ship of Xianmen Tianzong. After musing for a moment, He cupped his hands towards Lin Feng. The items traded with your esteemed sect, the hidden sect will properly prepare them. If sect leader Lin has any needs, you can also speak up, the hidden sect will prepare them. Lin Feng smiled. I heard that your sect has a special product called Blue Lightning Crystal. Let's use this item as the exchange. The specific exchange price will be negotiated by my sect's disciples. We don't need to talk anymore. Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt nodded. That's how it should be. Blue Lightning Crystal was his Thunderbolt Sword sect's most precious resource. Its value was hard to estimate. Lin Feng turned his gaze toward Sword Venerable of the Great Wilderness. He saw that Sword Venerable of the Great Wilderness's expression was as usual, calm as before. He did not feel the slightest bit annoyed, because the Celeritas and Thunderbolt sects divided up the dark light meteoric iron cleanly. He was very clear that since Lin Feng had specially asked him to stay, it was impossible that he was bored to the point of teasing him. Lin Feng also smiled. Compared to the dark light meteoric iron, I believe that you will be more interested in this item. As he spoke, Lin Feng stretched out his hand and drew a line in the void. A light and shadow illusion appeared. The scene in the light and shadow was a desert like the Gobi Desert. Sword Venerable of the Great Wilderness did not speak. Silently watching. Sword Venerable of the Thunderbolt and Celeritas silently watched the light and shadow. The scenery in their field of view changed rapidly. It fell from the sky to the desert. Moreover, it kept going down, going deep into the sand layer. Suddenly, a wisp of dim light lit up in the pitch-black darkness. The dim light scattered everywhere and formed light balls. Sword Venerable of the Great Wilderness, who had always been calm, showed a rare look of astonishment. This is the 9 Serenities Jade? This thing has always been found in the demon world of vast land of infinite region. I didn't expect to see it in this medium-class world. The 9 Serenities Jade, a rare treasure of heaven and earth, was an excellent auxiliary material for refining weapons. Not only could it improve the quality of celestial devices and even magic treasures, but it could also improve the success rate of refining. At the same time, in the process of refining weapons with the 9 Serenities Jade, cultivators could also comprehend many principles and concepts of the integration of all things. At the same time, this treasure inherited the aura of the remote antiquity, which was very helpful for comprehending the concept of the desolation of all things in the remote antiquity. The most inherited ancient book of the Wilderness Sword sect was called the Great Desolation Sword Scripture. The 9 Serenities Jade was very helpful for the cultivation of the cultivators in the sect. At the same time, the Wilderness Sword sect was also a sect with extremely high attainments in refining weapons in the human cultivation world of the Divine Land. Every disciple of the sect had a good level of refining weapons. Although they were all sword cultivators, they had all kinds of celestial devices, which were strange and changeable. They could be regarded as an unusual group of sword cultivators in the world. In the holy lands of swordsmanship like Mount Shu, Thunderbolt, Tongtian and Celeritas, the cultivators in the sect had nothing but swords. They could conquer the world with a long sword. Not only was the Wilderness Sword sect different, but the number of celestial devices mastered by the disciples were even more diverse than that of other sects that did not practice sword cultivation. However, this was a unique cultivation technique that was derived from their Great Desolation Sword Scripture. Everything in the world was used as a sword, and then it was continuously fused and refined. In the end, one would obtain a Tao sword that belonged to oneself, and it was also the treasure of the successor of the Great Desolation. Chapter 638. The sword cultivators of the Wilderness Sword sect were unusual. From the beginning of the foundation establishment stage, they would refine a large number of celestial devices. Not all of them were swords. Armors, accessories, elixir furnaces, Taoist robes, and even sabers, spears, swords, and sticks were all possible. It all depended on the cultivator. Before the elixir formation stage, the cultivator would combine all the celestial devices that he had refined into a furnace and refine them together. Finally, he would get a magic sword. Then, using the unique method of the Great Desolation Sword method, he would entrust his divine sense to the magic sword, which would accompany him to overcome the difficulties of the Golden Elixir period. After the success of the elixir formation stage, The magic sword would be refined again and upgraded to the level of a golden elixir period celestial device. It would also become the first celestial device of the sword cultivator of the wilderness after the elixir formation stage. Then, the sword cultivator of the wilderness would begin his second round of cultivation. Just like in the foundation establishment stage, he would refine a large number of celestial devices again, but this time they were all in the golden elixir period. There were many kinds of celestial devices. He could choose the powerful celestial devices in the sect as a template, or he could create his own ideas and innovate. When the sword cultivator of the wilderness reached the peak of the late golden elixir period, he would refine all the celestial devices in the golden elixir period and get a natal magic sword. Then he would entrust his divine sense to the sword and go through the void thunder tribulation together. It was the same when he reached the Yuanying period. He would repeat the cycle again until he reached the primordial spirit realm. If he reached the primordial spirit and refined his own natal magic weapon, then the cycle would come to an end. This was the cultivation method passed down in the wilderness sword sect since ancient times. All things were swords and finally returned to the same source to help the cultivator rush to a higher realm. This method had its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that it was easier to break through the bottleneck of a big realm and improve one's cultivation. The disadvantage was that refining a celestial device was very time-consuming. For most cultivators, time was always the most precious thing. If a cultivator spent a lot of time on refining, he was destined to spend less time on Taoist method cultivation, Dharma power accumulation, and sword principle actual combat training. This method did not have any special requirements for the total number of celestial devices refined in a big realm. However, the more celestial devices there were, the stronger the natal magic sword refined at the peak of the realm would be, and the greater the chance of breaking through the realm would be. This involved the problem of making a choice. Not only did the cultivators have to make their own choices, but the elders of the sect also had to teach them in accordance with their aptitude. They had to accurately judge the potential of the cultivators in all aspects and help them formulate the best plan. There were thousands of great ways and each was different. The cultivation method of the wilderness sword sect could be regarded as a big oddity in the human cultivation world of the divine land. For the cultivation of the wilderness sword sect, the 9 Serenities jade was undoubtedly an extremely valuable resource and help. For the wilderness sword sect, it was undoubtedly more important than the dark light meteoric iron. However, the 9 nether jade transformation had only appeared in the demon race world, Tianhuang mainland, and it was rare. Sword Venerable of the Great Wilderness calmed himself down and looked up at Lin Feng. Lin Feng said with a smile, "I hope our sects can have a closer cooperation in the future." "It's our honor." Sword Master of the Great Wilderness was silent for a while. He had already understood what Lin Feng meant. Slowly he nodded his head. After settling the matter with the 3 sword sects and sending the 3 people off the mountain, Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao returned to the All Heavens Hall. The 2 reported to Lin Feng together. Lin Feng nodded his head and said with a smile, "During this period of time, you guys will also be busy in the Xiantian realm. But don't relax, this is also a kind of experience." Zhu Yi replied, "Master, please rest assured we understand. There are thousands of great ways. We don't necessarily have to cultivate this kind of way, but after experiencing it, there will always be benefits." "Yes, that's right." Lin Feng nodded his head with a smile. Shi Tianhao asked, "Master, choosing the wilderness sword sect and not the constellation sword sect is because of the Qin dynasty?" Lin Feng and Zhu Yi listened and laughed at the same time. "You're right. In the 9 Heavens Sword Alliance, the Blaze Sword Sect and the Celeritas Sword Sect have always been close to Shu Mountain. The Celeritas Sword Sect gradually changed their stance and began to lean towards neutrality. Tianjia Peak Sword Trials, visiting Yujing Mountain, until the Battle of Xiling City, the Celeritas Sword Sect began to lean towards Xianmen Tianzong. Among the remaining sects, the Heavenly Sword Sect was on the side of Taishu Temple, the Sun Moon Sword Sect leaned towards the Qin dynasty, the Songhai Sword Sect leaned towards the Great Zhou dynasty. The Thunderbolt Sword Sect and the Heavenly Sword Sect allied, while the Constellation Sword Sect and the Wilderness Sword Sect were always neutral. But since the start of the Tianjia Peak sword trials, the Constellation Sword sect was gradually roped in by the Qin dynasty. Lin Feng split the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance this time, pulling the Thunderbolt Sword sect, Celeritas Sword sect and the Wilderness Sword sect into his camp. It was still the same, eating the meat and leaving some soup for others. Since the Qin dynasty had already spent a lot of effort on the Constellation Sword sect, then he wouldn't reach out. It was just that the Constellation Sword sect naturally wouldn't be able to enjoy first-hand access to the resources in the Xiantian realm. As the Thunderbolt Sword Venerable and the others left the Kunlun mountain range, the Old Sword Immortal and the Constellation Sword Venerable naturally understood the changes. The Constellation Sword Venerable didn't feel anything. He had already made his choice before. The changes in the current situation only made him further determined to get closer to the Qin dynasty. The Old Sword Immortal's feelings were complicated. All along, the Thunderbolt Sword sect and his Heavenly Sword sect had been on the same side, but now they had parted ways. At this time, the Old Sword Immortal had a clearer understanding of the big move that Lin Feng had made after the Battle of Shilling City. The situation of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land had really changed. The Old Sword Immortal and the Constellation Sword Venerable once again ascended the mountain to pay a visit. Lin Feng was similarly happy to receive them. Setting the Thunderbolt Sword sect and the Celeritas Sword sect as first-hand partners didn't mean that Xianmen Tianzong wouldn't do business with the Heavenly Sword sect and the Constellation Sword sect. Even if the Songhai Sword sect, the Sun Moon Sword sect, or even the Blaze Sword sect came to visit, they would still exchange resources. However, in terms of treatment, price and supply, they definitely wouldn't be as generous as the Thunderbolt Sword sect. The Old Sword Immortal and the others originally came to seek the most generous treatment. After sending off the Old Sword Immortal and the others, Lin Feng still needed to receive the representatives of the Purple Sky Path and the Northern Militant Royal Court. On one hand, he needed to receive their congratulations, and on the other hand, he needed to have a closer discussion about the Xiantian realm. Towards these two close allies, Lin Feng's attitude was naturally different. For example, he allowed them to have a fixed number of disciples freely enter the Xiantian realm for a certain period of time. On the other hand, it would be much more convenient for Xianmen Tianzong's disciples to go to the territories of the two families. The Northern Militant Royal Court destroyed the Celestial Pool sect, and now dominated the northern border. In a sense, even the Arctic Ice Sea was under their influence. After digesting the resources in this area and nurturing large amounts of high-level experts, their overall strength would definitely show explosive growth. Many of the resources of the northern border snowy plains that Xianmen Tianzong needed would also be supported by the Northern Militant Royal Court. The Purple Sky Path also had a deep foundation. As for the development of the medium-class worlds, other than supporting the Jun family in the ancient Yuan-Tian realm, they also set foot in other medium-class worlds. Some of the scarce resources of the Divine Land were obtained by the Purple Sky Path. Xianmen Tianzong's relationship with the Purple Sky Path was even closer, so it was easier for them to obtain these resources. Some of the minerals in the Xiantian realm, the Purple Sky Path and the Northern Militant Royal Court were also interested. For example, the vital Yuan magnetic steel of the Great Zhou dynasty. The Purple Sky Path was one of the few forces in the Divine Land that also had a large-scale demand. During this period of time, Lin Feng could be said to have clouds and rain with a flip of his hand. Not using force to conquer, he had further expanded the influence of Xianmen Tianzong. This was also the reason why even in the face of a magic treasure embryo of creation, Lin Feng had to try his best to find ways to preserve the Xiantian realm. Of course, to preserve the Xiantian realm, one must first have enough strength to occupy it. Otherwise, other forces would also step in and take a share of the loot. What's more, they might even join forces to squeeze Xianmen Tianzong out of the picture. If such a medium universe fell into the hands of sects like the Celeritas Sword sect and the Wilderness Sword sect, they couldn't defend it by themselves. The Purple Sky Path and even the Northern Militant Royal Court couldn't do it. For Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong, it was a timely reign. In the Battle of West Hill City, Lin Feng successfully established his prestige and demonstrated his own force. The Xiantian realm greatly enriched the overall strength and resource reserves of Xianmen Tianzong. It improved the situation of Xianmen Tianzong being so poor that he only had force left. Not only did it improve Xianmen Tianzong's own development potential, but it also gave Lin Feng more room to operate in the process of communicating with the entire human race cultivation world. It was convenient to unite more people to gather around him. The magic treasure of creation was important, but this kind of seemingly inconspicuous sect foundation was also indispensable. However, how to deal with the contradiction between the golden ball of light at the bottom of the black pool and the loss of spiritual energy in the Xiantian realm depended on Lin Feng's ability. Over the past few days, Lin Feng himself remained on Yujing Mountain after receiving the group of Essence Soul bigwigs who had visited. In addition to a group of younger disciples who had to cultivate seriously, the practical personnel in the sect, headed by Dao Jiqiang, had begun to enter the Xiantian realm on a large scale and carried out development. Feng Baiangji, Shizhongtian, Monk Dade and Wu Tong were in charge of the Xiantian realm, so ordinary people didn't dare to invade. Tunten almost lived in the Xiantian realm, while Zhuge Fengling and her gold-digging mouse stayed there for a long time. They felt like they had entered heaven. In the past, Zhuge Fengling felt that her status in the desolate Sky Valley was rather awkward. Now that she was in the Xiantian realm, she felt like a fish in water. She had already reported to Lin Feng and Shi Tianhao that she was prepared to stay in the Xiantian realm. The other sects and forces that had reached a general agreement with Xianmen Tianzong also began to send people to apply to enter the Xiantian realm, hoping to survey the mineral veins or the production of spirit herbs, so that they could determine the specific details of the cooperation. However, these applications were all rejected. Even the Great Qin dynasty, who had already made an agreement, was asked to postpone their entry on the grounds that Xianmen Tianzong's exploration of the Xiantian realm had not been completed. This world was occupied by Xianmen Tianzong, so there was nothing wrong with it. The other forces would also do the same when guarding their own treasure vaults, or even guard them more closely. However, if this continued for a long time, some suspicious people might smell something unusual and guess that there was a bigger secret hidden in the Xiantian realm. On Yujing Mountain, Lin Feng calmly sat on the fishing platform and revealed a faint smile. "Don't disappoint me." Chapter 639. While making preparations for the Heaven Mystic Realms side, Lin Feng was also looking over Xiaoyan's side. On Yujing Mountain, in a space of purple qi, Xiaoyan sat upright in a milky white sea of pure yang real fire. Around him, the nether evil flame, the sun real fire, the Nanmingli fire, and the Xiantian tribulation flame formed by the four true fires floated up and down with him in the white sea of fire. Outside of the purple gas, Lin Feng calmly looked at this scene. Beside him was a girl in green sitting cross-legged. It was Xiaozhen. She was also circulating her cultivation technique. In the girl's eyes, the golden light of fire continuously flashed. The rhythm of the golden flames mixed with red and blue light was the same as the rhythm of the flames flashing around Xiaoyan in the purple qi. Xiaoyan, who had kept his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes and looked at Lin Feng. "Master, I'm ready." Lin Feng smiled and nodded. "Go ahead and do it." Xiaoyan let out a clear whistle, and the golden elixir of the true fire in his body began to spin. His mind faintly merged with the void, and he could feel the gaze of heaven and earth on him. All his mana and divine abilities were operated to the extreme by him, and without any warning, a large crack suddenly split open in the air. A twisting thick lightning bolt struck down toward Xiaoyan's head. Lin Feng withdrew his magic power at this time. The void thunder tribulation had descended, and the help of outsiders would only be harmful. It was all up to the cultivator to withstand the test himself. Without Lin Feng's help to suppress it, the five true fires around Xiaoyan immediately showed signs of instability, but he did not panic. He circulated the Tao of Heavenly Virtue scripture. First, he used the 8 trigrams of the Great Way to stabilize the pure yang real fire, and then step by step, he used the 4 symbols Heaven Opening Book as a foundation to control the other 4 true fires. At this moment, Xiaoyan was like an excellent driver, driving a carriage with 5 fierce horses and running wildly on the rugged mountain road. On both sides of the road there were steep cliffs. If one was not careful, the carriage would be destroyed and the passengers would be smashed to pieces. apart from external enemies who might take advantage of the situation. Little Yen is facing the most dangerous nascent soul formation thunder tribulation since ancient times, if she goes through it alone. Lin Feng's expression also became rather stern. He stared at Xiao Yan, who was surrounded by the true flames of tribulation lightning, and faced internal and external problems. No one could help Xiao Yan when he was going through the lightning tribulation, but if he really encountered a crisis of death, Lin Feng was confident that he could protect Xiao Yan's life. However, it was still extremely dangerous for Xiao Yan. This was a high-risk, high-reward challenge. If he lost, he might lose all his family's fortune, and he would be back to square one night. This would make Xiao Yan experience the misfortune of falling from heaven to hell in his youth. If he won, he would win handsomely. They were all formed Yuanying, and their actual supernatural powers and powers were also different. Xiao Yan used the power of the 5 great true fires to help him form his nascent soul, and his power would be far beyond ordinary. What's that old saying again? Lin Feng stared at Xiao Yan and thought to himself, that's right, it's either the flower blooms and the riches, or the whole family is rich and powerful. However, Xiao Yan had obviously withstood the test. Previously, he had nourished his powers for a long time, making him an extremely outstanding driver. He could control the 5 fierce horses under him. Not only did he suppress them from causing trouble, but he also helped him on a smooth road on the rugged road. Now, it seemed that the days of dormancy because of the Nanmingli fire had brought great benefits to Xiao Yan's cultivation in the future, and it had a far-reaching impact. From the time he advanced to the late stage of the golden elixir, he could control 4 types of true fires, to now he could form his nascent soul with 5 fires. It was all thanks to that period of dormancy. Not only did it hone his will, but it also allowed him to analyze his supernatural powers and powers. It was like a piece of iron that was already extraordinary, but after being quenched and polished, it became tougher and tougher. However, humans had their limits. As time passed, the 5 types of true fires became more and more violent, and they gradually showed signs of losing control. For Xiao Yan, who was in the late stage of the golden elixir, it was still difficult for him to control 5 types of true fires at the same time. However, it was also at this time that the void thunder tribulation gradually stopped. A clear light shone on top of Xiao Yan's head, and the golden elixir slowly rose, emitting a dazzling flame. In the flame, the figure of a small baby appeared. It was his Yuanying. Xiao Yan successfully passed the void thunder tribulation and formed his nascent soul. Once Yuanying formed, the state of Xiao Yan's supernatural powers and powers instantly changed, and the pressure from before suddenly disappeared. The baby, who looked very similar to Xiao Yan when he was young, waved his hand. Suddenly, a milky white flame appeared under his body, like a lotus seat holding him up. The black heaven tribulation flame turned into the image of the azure dragon. The true sunfire turned into the image of the vermilion bird. The nether evil flame turned into the image of the white tiger. And the Nanmingli fire turned into the image of the black tortoise. All of them circled around the baby, emitting a powerful force together. The next moment, the baby returned to the top of Xiao Yan's head. Xiao Yan also opened his eyes, looked at Lin Feng and Xiao Zhener and said with a smile, "Master Zhener, I did it." Lin Feng smiled and nodded. Finally, it was more daunting than dangerous. Xiao Zhener also smiled and said, "Congratulations, Brother Xiao Yan, for forming your nascent soul. Congratulations, host direct disciple, Xiao Yan, for advancing to the stage of Yuanying." At the same time, a system notification rang in Lin Feng's ears. Because half of the host's direct disciples have successfully formed their nascent souls, the host is specially rewarded by the system. Among all the spirit-nurturing level magic treasures that the host currently owns, other than the Tao-proving level magic treasures, the host can choose one to upgrade to the incarnation level. In the past, when I encountered this kind of situation, I would be rewarded with upgrading a small realm of my own Tao. Lin Feng thought to himself, the 3 realms of primordial spirit are almost the same as the difference between the realms below primordial spirit. Xiao Yan and the others forming their nascent souls won't be able to guarantee me to reach the void returning level. Speaking of which, sometimes it's harder to upgrade a magic treasures realm than cultivating, but I can casually upgrade a spirit-nurturing level magic treasure. This is not bad. Lin Feng did not mind that the Bell of Fate could not be upgraded. It was his Tao-proving level magic treasure, and it was the right path for him to cultivate and refine it. Although he was also looking forward to the power of the Bell of Fate after it reached the Incarnation level, or Mahayana level. Lin Feng thought for a while. There's no hurry to upgrade which magic treasure, I'll see if I can get a more suitable one from the system. After Xiao Yan formed his nascent soul, he went into seclusion again to nourish his yuanying and magic power. Meanwhile, Lin Feng officially set off for the Heaven Mystic Realm. During these days, apart from protecting Xiao Yan, he had also been calculating the overall flow of spirit qi in the Heaven Mystic Realm. This kind of calculation was meticulous down to the smallest detail, and the total amount was incomparably huge. It was very difficult for normal primordial spirit incarnations, or even primordial spirit return to Void Realm cultivators to grasp the calculation without the slightest error, and only Lin Feng who had magical powers could calculate it clearly. During this period of time, Dao Jiqiang and the others who entered the Heaven Mystic Realm had been making advanced preparations according to Lin Feng's instructions. When Lin Feng came to the Heaven Mystic Realm, he silently sensed the fluctuation of spirit qi and nodded at Dao Jiqiang and the others. Well done. Dao Jiqiang bowed and replied, I dare not delay sect master's important matters. Lin Feng made a hand seal with both hands, and the Heaven Mystic Realm suddenly changed. Countless huge talismans and seals surged together, forming an extremely huge magic formation that enveloped the entire dimensional realm. It was the Yin and Yang life and death formation. When the 12 treasures were activated at the same time, the Yin and Yang life and death formation immediately set off a shocking power, causing the entire dimensional realm to shake faintly, and the spirit qi in the world suddenly became chaotic. Two extremes, Feng, Buddhist monk Dade, Shi Zhongtian, and Wu Tong had been informed by Lin Feng before, so they were mentally prepared. However, the golden light ball at the bottom of the black pool was startled, and a majestic aura suddenly spread out. As the embryo of the magic treasure of fate, the spiritual sense of the golden light ball was extremely vast. Usually, it was almost integrated with the Heaven Mystic Realm, and did not show up at all. Only when there was a major change would it react. For example, like now, Lin Feng's hands kept changing the incantation, and one after another, his magic power was injected into the Yin and Yang life and death formation, pushing the formation to the extreme. The majestic power of the Yin and Yang reversal spread out, causing the whole Heaven Mystic Realm enveloped by the formation to distort. The golden light ball at the bottom of the black pool became more and more restless. On one hand, Lin Feng activated the Yin and Yang life and death formation, and on the other hand, he comforted the golden light ball. Their divine senses communicated with each other. The golden light ball carefully tasted the power of the Yin and Yang life and death formation, and gradually understood. Lin Feng wanted to integrate the Yin and Yang life and death formation with the Heaven Mystic Realm. Then, through the power of the Yin and Yang reversal, the golden light ball and the original flow of spiritual qi in the Heaven Mystic Realm would be balanced, and then transferred to the outside world. The majestic spiritual qi of the vast world would continue to nourish the black pool and the golden light ball, helping them grow and mature. It was hard to predict whether the golden light ball would eventually succeed in the Heaven Mystic Realm. It was very likely that the spiritual qi of the Heaven Mystic Realm would be sucked dry before it matured. But the total amount of spiritual qi in the vast world was abundant, so there was no need to worry about this. If the golden light ball was connected to the spiritual qi system of the vast world, the Heaven Mystic Realm itself could also be preserved. It was the best of both worlds. The golden light ball gradually settled down and watched quietly. It watched as Lin Feng activated the Yin and Yang life and death formation, and took it, and the black pool into the circulation system of the two extremes. It watched as the boundary power between the Heaven Mystic Realm and the vast world became temporarily blurred. This was destined to be a long process. Lin Feng needed to carefully control the Yin and Yang life and death formation. However, a few days later, Feng Liangji, who was guarding the boundary passage between the Heaven Mystic Realm and the Void Battlefield, suddenly sensed someone approaching from the other side of the passage. The other party was extremely powerful. Impressively, he was a third-tier primordial soul realm expert at the Tao integration realm. He broke through Feng Liangji's blockade of the boundary passage and approached the heaven mystic realm. This person did not intend to enter the heaven mystic realm after breaking through the boundary passage. It seemed that he only wanted to determine the exact location of the heaven mystic realm in the void heavens and prevent the heaven mystic realm from getting lost in the void turbulence. After determining the location, he passed through the door but did not enter. Instead, he stood outside the barrier-like boundary power. Feng Liangji approached, but the intruder suddenly activated a beam of black light, intending to overturn heaven and earth and blur the boundary between life and death. So powerful. Feng Liangji's expression changed slightly. He immediately knew that he was no match for this person. This Tao technique inheritance is the same as that of King Qinguang and the other underworld hall cultivators, but it's many times more powerful. Chapter 640. From the outside, it looked like a mass of black energy condensed into the shape of a person. Its magic power was extremely powerful, but there was no comparison in the void, so it was impossible to tell its size. But when Feng Tupoles flew over to meet the enemy, he discovered that the figure formed by the black energy was even larger than a 1,000-meter-tall mountain. The visual impact was very strong. The person rode on the black light and blocked the Tupoles' sky peak. Then another destructive black light shot out, this time towards the heaven mystic realm. Lin Feng's expression didn't change. He activated the yin and yang life and death formation, and the entire heaven mystic realm was covered in a layer of light, isolating the terrifying black light. However, under the effect of the yin and yang life and death formation that reversed the universe, the mysterious heaven realm itself began to gather and twist, as if it had been twisted into two parts, like a gourd or an hourglass. Lin Feng tilted his head slightly. Xianli, the girl who had been standing silently behind him all this time, stepped out into the void and arrived outside the mystic heaven realm through the realm passageway. Xianli patted the sword case on her back and opened it. Suddenly, a boundless murderous light gushed out. This light wasn't as deadly as the enemy's black light, but it was a more domineering destruction intent. Xianli slashed out with her sword, and a terrible wound was torn open in the void. Endless vitality was destroyed, as if a living being had been injured. Blood splattered everywhere. The enemy struck out with a palm, repelling the Tupoles' sky peak. Then his hands swirled with silk-like black light that turned into a raging wave that met the terrifying heaven-punishing sword light. The overwhelming wave of black light was cut apart by the heaven-punishing sword light. However, the wave of light quickly spun like an ocean, turning into a giant whirlpool that could swallow the heaven-punishing sword light whole. It was going to trap the sword light. Xianli's pitch-black eyes suddenly turned crimson, and the sword intent around her became even more ferocious. A voice came from the giant formed of black energy. Master of the Celestial Gate, you live up to your reputation. I'm not sure I can defeat you, but you can't protect this dimensional realm. Protection was always passive. In a situation where the difference in strength between the two sides was not too great, the attacker would have a much greater advantage over the defender. With that, the giant formed from the black gas suddenly disintegrated in the void, turning into a black cloud. Within the black cloud, there was a faint brilliance flashing, and an extremely terrifying aura was emitted. The moment the aura was released, the expressions of Twin Peaks Feng, Shi Zhongtian, and the others instantly changed. This was because they could clearly feel the aura of a creator-grade artifact. Even the glowing golden sphere in the mystic heaven realm was shaking violently. Lin Feng carefully sensed it, but shook his head. It's not a creation-grade magic treasure, but, within the black clouds, a terrifying brilliance whizzed out, turning into an extremely vast and thick pillar of light that traversed the heavens. Its imposing manner seemed to be able to pierce through the entire vast 1,000 domains. Within the pillar of light, layers upon layers of black shadows flickered, as if the pillar of light contained many independent worlds. Every independent world contained a profound concept of power. Many independent worlds overlapped with each other, but they didn't fuse together. Instead, they formed a mysterious resonance, causing the power of this magnificent pillar of light to become extremely terrifying. It was as if the infinite great Tao was vibrating together, about to shatter the vast thousand domains. Xianli didn't say a word. Her long black and white hair fluttered behind her, and her eyes had completely turned blood red. The clear light of the Sky Destroyer sword in her hand surged to the extreme, and a streak of blood-red sword light surged out, slashing towards her opponent. Within the black clouds, rays of gray brilliance flowed, forming a Tao fruit. It was half black and half white, but it was not the condensation of the power of yin and yang, but the condensation of the power of life and death. The black half of the Tao fruit flickered, and gradually a figure appeared. It was the image of an old man with a long beard. His eyes were sharp, and the sword aura around him soared to the sky. He was like a peerless divine sword, about to slash the blue skies above and the yellow springs below. The long-bearded old man's figure appeared from the black half of the Tao fruit, and the next moment, he moved to the white half. When he reached the white half, the long-bearded old man's figure suddenly began to turn from illusory to real. A terrifying sword intent erupted from his body, and his index and middle fingers formed a sword. Immediately, a resplendent sword light flew out to meet Xianli's blood-red Sky Destroyer sword light. As if two swords collided, the long-bearded old man's sword light was directly cut apart by the Sky Destroyer sword light. The blood-red sword light drew a mysterious trajectory between the heavens and earth, and continued to fall, directly killing the long-bearded old man. Just as the Sky Destroyer sword light continued forward, preparing to completely destroy the other party's Tao fruit, from the black clouds, a gray brilliance flowed, forming another life and death netherworld Tao fruit. This time it was also half black and half white, and in the black half a figure appeared. This figure was not the long-bearded old man, but a middle-aged man who looked like a Confucian scholar. This middle-aged man held a book of poetry in his hand, and suddenly, the sound of reading filled the void. A righteous force of heaven and earth, the power of the eternal Grand Spirit, spread out. As the brilliance of the Tao fruit flashed, the middle-aged Confucian scholar also moved from the black half to the white half. His whole body seemed to become real, and he stepped out from it. Endless words of the great Tao turned into a magnificent chapter, and it met the mournful Sky Destroyer sword light. The two sides collided in the void, and the brilliant words were all annihilated. After withstanding the opponent's continuous attacks, the blood-red sword light finally exhausted its strength. A voice came from the black clouds. Good, this sword of yours has the potential to achieve creation. If you completely hone it, I'm afraid it will become a creation magic treasure. Feng Liangji watched from the side, and he was deeply shocked. This person is not afraid of the Sky Destroyer sword. With such strength, I'm afraid he is not any weaker than Xian Longsheng, Quang Heng, and the others. Moreover, although the newcomer was on the defensive against Xianli, it did not affect him from attacking the heaven mystic realm from the other side. The terrifying light beam from before had already hit the boundary power of the heaven mystic realm, which was like the outer wall of the realm. It fiercely collided with the yin and yang life and death formation, trying to forcefully break the formation and destroy the heaven mystic realm. Master of the Celestial Gate, you have captured and killed a cultivator of the underworld hall. You will repay me with this dimensional realm. A deep voice came from the black clouds, shaking the void. In the depths of the black clouds, there was a vague figure that flickered, and his appearance could not be seen clearly. In front of this person, there was a book that was opened and floating in the air. The magnificent light beam formed by the power of many independent worlds became more and more powerful, and it hit the light screen of the yin and yang life and death formation, until it was on the verge of collapse. Although it is not a real creation magic treasure, its strength is already very close. Lin Feng shook his head slightly. Back then, he had used the yin and yang life and death formation to fight against the real creation magic treasure Taishu Temple, so he had a good grasp of the opponent's strength. In a sense, the opponent's attack was comparable to the current sky-crushing sword, and even better than the Grand Imperial Palace he had encountered in the Cloudy Forest realm. Although the incomplete Immortal Dragon City was also extremely powerful, it was mainly reflected in its defensive power. Its offensive power was not outstanding among magic treasures of the same level. But now, the heaven-punishing sword was controlled by Yunli herself, and not by Lin Feng. Most of Lin Feng's energy was spent on the heaven realm, and he could not compare to Yin Li's fusion with the sword, which boosted each other's magic power. The newcomer used his own Dao fruit magic power to block the sky-crushing sword, but he did not relax his attack on Lin Feng. As he said, it was not difficult for Lin Feng to protect himself in the face of such a strong attack, but it would be difficult to protect the heaven mystic realm. But after carefully sensing the changes in magic power, Lin Feng suddenly had another idea. "Oh, you came at the right time. You have helped me a lot. Maybe you can make my plan more perfect." Many thoughts flashed through Lin Feng's mind, and an even bolder plan gradually took shape. Lin Feng looked at the opponent's attack with a sneer. "I have this plan for a long time. Unfortunately, I am using the yin and yang life and death formation to fuse with the heaven mystic realm. Just relying on Yin Li's attack power is a little lacking, so I had to settle for the next best thing and carry out the current plan. Now that you have delivered yourself to my door, you have fulfilled my wish." Lin Feng put his palms together, and the yin and yang life and death formation wrapped around the heaven mystic realm and retreated, as if it could not withstand the opponent's attack. The figure in the black cloud reached out, and gently flipped a page in the scroll in front of him. The majestic pillar of light that was attacking the mystic heaven realm erupted with even more ferocious power. One minor world after another within the pillar of light began to collapse. The explosive power in that instant was almost comparable to a real creation magic treasure, and the light beam chose to attack the center of the heaven mystic realm's distortion. Because of the huge distortion power in the heaven mystic realm, the people inside the world could not feel the spatial changes, but from the outside, the whole world had been distorted into a shape similar to an hourglass. The smaller part in the middle was the place where the distortion power was the strongest, and it was also the intersection point where the two opposing forces converged. It was like the bearing in the center of a millstone, and this time, the light beam chose this place. The violent power burst out, directly broke the yin and yang life and death formation, and bombarded this intersection point. In an instant, the huge medium-sized world, with this intersection as the dividing line, was actually split in two. The people in the heaven mystic realm had not reacted, but Feng Liangji, who was in the void, could see it clearly. He could not help but be shocked, but then he found that something was wrong. The figure in the black cloud also exclaimed, I have to thank you." Lin Feng's calm voice came from the heaven mystic realm. The yin and yang life and death formation lit up again, and the intertwining black and white light flickered continuously, like a rope connecting the two divided worlds. Endless space folded and changed, and the power of the yin and yang life and death formation protected the heaven mystic realm, so that it would not collapse because of the split. At the same time, purple qi surged in the void, and a white jade mountain descended. It was Mount Yujing. Chapter 641. Yujing Mountain descended into the void. The branches of the Xiantian treasure tree swayed, breaking through the endless space. The surging cyclic purple qi continued to spread in all directions. After the Xiantian realm had been split into two, half of the space changed and its volume shrank rapidly. Lin Feng injected dermic power into it. Under the effect of the yin and yang life and death formation, the spirit qi flow in this half of the Xiantian realm that had collapsed gradually resonated with Yujing Mountain. The cyclic purple qi, like a sea of clouds, shrouded this half of the Xiantian realm. The purple mist surged and surrounded Jade Capital Mountain, and half of the mystic heaven sector. Then a colorful, glittering circle of light appeared at the periphery of the boundless sea of purple clouds, forming a perfect sphere. Yujing Mountain, the purple sea of clouds, the Xiantian treasure tree, and half of the Xiantian realm were all wrapped in this giant ball of light. Although Lin Feng was not on the mountain, his dermic power and divine consciousness resonated with the system of Yujing Mountain. Yujing Mountain seemed to have transformed into a complete world of creation. At the same time, half of the Xiantian realm was also integrated into it. Countless talisman characters appeared on the surface of the giant ball of light, guiding the spirit qi of the boundless world into it, perfectly connecting with the spirit qi of the boundless world. The spatial boundaries of the Xiantian realm blurred and merged with the boundless world. The power of the boundaries disappeared, An endless black water surged out, turning into a vast ocean. The black water was bone-piercingly cold, devouring all light. It nurtured the three power intents of pure Yin, extreme cold, and darkness at the same time. Moreover, they had all reached an extremely profound realm. But in the center of the Black Sea, there was a powerful existence of extreme yang and extreme heat. It emitted endless light, opposite the Black Sea. Yin and yang blended together but did not interfere with each other. The vast Black Sea, at the foot of Yujing Mountain. The mountains and the sea were interdependent, incomparably harmonious. It was like the celestial mountains and divine seas of ancient times. It was a spectacular sight. Layers of purple energy floated above the sea, enveloping Yujing Mountain and the Xiantian treasure tree. The mountains and the sea were both wrapped up by the giant ball of light, like a brand new world. The spirit qi of the boundless world was continuously supplied to the Black Sea, giving birth to more golden-eyed black fish. It continued to operate in the same way, nourishing the golden ball of light hidden in the core of the Black Sea, helping it mature faster. At this moment, the golden ball of light had completely settled down. All that was left was the magnificent Black Sea that had merged with Yujing Mountain. After that, Lin Feng withdrew all the power of the Yin and Yang life and death formation to stabilize the other half of the mysterious heaven realm. With the help of Lin Feng and the Yin and Yang life and death formation, the remaining half of the mystic heaven realm gradually closed up. The twisted and folded space was completely restored, and the flow of spiritual energy in the world that had lost its balance also stabilized. The world inside didn't seem to have changed at all. Under the effect of the Yin and Yang life and death formation, only the black pool and the golden sphere were separated from the heaven mystic realm. Everything else had not changed. It was as good as before. Originally, Lin Feng had only wanted to change the flow of spiritual energy in the Black Pond, diverting the spiritual energy from the vast thousand world into the heaven mystic realm, to fuel the growth of the golden light ball, and replace the spiritual energy in the heaven mystic realm. But it wasn't stable, and Lin Feng had to spend a lot of time and energy to watch over it. He also had to leave the Yin and Yang life and death formation in the heaven mystic realm for a long time to maintain this new operating system, until the golden light ball matured completely. But now it was all over. It was completed in one go without any follow-up problems. The Black Pond and the golden light ball were completely separated from the heaven mystic realm, hanging under Yujing Mountain to receive nourishment from the spiritual energy of the vast thousand world. The heaven mystic realm, on the other hand, was independent and no different from other medium-class worlds. It only needed to operate normally on its own track. When the damage boundary power in the heaven mystic realm was completely stabilized, Lin Feng could also withdraw the Yin and Yang life and death formation without any restrictions. In the heaven mystic realm, Lin Feng laughed. "I really have to thank you." As he spoke, he had already left the heaven mystic realm. A clear light shone over his head, and Yujing Mountain loomed in the void, bringing with it great pressure. Xianli also returned to Lin Feng's side, her monstrous sword essence still pointed at the opponent in the black cloud. The figure in the black cloud was silent for a moment, then said slowly, "The master of the celestial gate is really good. That Black Sea originally belonged to this dimensional realm. There is something contained within it, and it actually contains the aura of a good fortune treasure?" The figure's eyes shined with a strange light as he stared at Lin Feng and Jade Capital Mountain. Lin Feng glanced at him and said indifferently, "The book in front of you also contains the aura of a treasure of fortune. I'm also a little interested." As he said that, he patted the sword case on Xianli's back. Xianli became one with the case, and the sword was pulled out by Lin Feng. Then, a black and white light lit up on Lin Feng's body, and plated a layer on the sword. Endless chants of the great Tao echoed in the void. Lin Feng waved his sword, and a blood-red heaven-punishing sword light mixed with black and white creation divine light flew out, slicing through the sky and directly splitting open the black clouds. The figure in the black cloud patted the scroll in front of him. As the pages flipped, many small worlds seemed to appear at the same time, stacking together to form a barrier that blocked Lin Feng's sword light. With a loud boom, the barrier shattered and the sword light dissipated. The shockwaves of the collision spread out in all directions, sweeping through the void. As Mahayana-grade treasures, the two peaks had to take the shockwaves seriously. Yujing Mountain glowed and resonated with the yin and yang life and death formation protecting the heaven mystic realm, shielding it from the shockwaves. With Yujing Mountain's protection, Lin Feng didn't have to worry about his opponent destroying the heaven mystic realm. After the collision ended, half a page of paper could be seen floating in the void of the universe, like a faint speck of light. It was Lin Feng and the heaven-punishing sword who had the upper hand, shaving off half a page of the opponent's scroll. However, it was also during this collision that the black cloud slowly dissipated. It turned into a vast expanse of black smoke that spread through the air and quickly disappeared without a trace. If I can obtain the treasures in the Black Sea and refine them into the Book of Life and Death, the Book of Life and Death will be completely refined and become a true creation treasure. And it will be one of the best creation treasures. A deep voice sounded in the void, lingering in the air. Lin Feng smiled faintly. The reverse is also true. He reached out and picked up the half-page that floated in the air. The half-page emitted a rich aura of creation and powerful magic power that kept vibrating. Although it was only a fragment, its power far surpassed that of ordinary treasures. With the addition of the Black Sea and the Golden Ball of Light, Yujing Mountain is in a completely new environment. I can't absorb it into my soul for now. Otherwise, I would have been able to kill this person. Lin Feng shook his head and suppressed the half-page. Still, it's a pleasant surprise to have obtained this item. He tried to figure out the concept of power within, and recalled the life and death nether Dao fruit that Xianli had used when fighting with that person. He gained a better understanding of the king of the underworld's orthodoxy. A smile appeared at the corner of Lin Feng's mouth. Judging by his cultivation, I'm afraid he's already a top expert of the underworld hall. It's very likely that he's the hall master of the underworld hall. However, his incomplete creation treasure clearly has another owner. Interesting. Really interesting. Lin Feng flicked his sleeves and returned to the heaven mystic realm with Xian Li and Feng Biangji, who had returned to their human forms. He first operated the yin and yang life and death formation to stabilize the heaven mystic realm's damaged domain power, so that it could heal as soon as possible and seal itself completely. Shi Zhongtian, Zen Master Dade, and the others had a deeper understanding of the flow of spiritual qi in the dimensional realm. At this moment, they could already sense that the flow of spiritual qi in the heaven mystic realm had completely changed. The phenomenon of spiritual qi exhaustion in the major mineral veins and medicinal valleys had completely disappeared. The problems that had previously plagued the heaven mystic realm had been perfectly resolved. From now on, the heaven mystic realm would be the same as other dimensional realms. As long as the mineral veins and spiritual plants were not overexploited, and the mineral veins and medicinal valleys' spiritual veins were kept intact, they could be used for a long time. The heaven mystic realm would officially become Xianmen Tianzong's rear base. It would boost Xianmen Tianzong's overall strength and resource reserves in the coming days. Regarding Lin Feng, Shi Zhongtian had always listened to his grandson Shi Tianhao's descriptions. It was only when he went to the Black Pool with Lin Feng's Earth Sovereign's Dharma body that he had a more direct understanding of Lin Feng. Just the Dharma body's divine ability and Dharma power were enough to make him extremely fearful. And this was under the situation where they had not actually fought. This time, when Lin Feng separated the golden light ball from the heaven mystic realm, Shi Zhongtian had truly witnessed Lin Feng's means. When the enemy came to attack, it became the blade in Lin Feng's hand that helped him. Shi Zhongtian thought to himself, originally, I was still thinking about how to solve the conflict between the Dharma treasure of creation and the heaven mystic realm's resources. I didn't expect it to end up like this. The Celestial Gate Master probably already had a plan in mind at that time. With such means, it's no wonder that he was so confident. Lin Feng looked at Feng Biangji and Zen Master Dade. From now on, the two of you will still be in charge of the heaven mystic realm. We are ashamed, Feng Biangji and Zen Master Dade said at the same time. I'm afraid that we will fail you, but we will do our best. Lin Feng shook his head and smiled. It's all right. I will also pay attention to this place. He then turned to look at Pupil S. What about you? Will you stay here? Or will you follow me back to Mount Yujing? After a pause, Lin Feng continued. The black pool where you originally lived has turned into a vast ocean, and it is connected to my mountain and sea. From today onwards, this ocean will be called the Yinyang Ocean, and it will be one with Mount Yujing. Pupil S thought for a while and said, I still want to teach and enlighten my people, so I will follow you back to the mountain. Lin Feng smiled and said, If that's the case, let's go. After returning to Mount Yujing, Lin Feng looked at the vast ocean at the foot of the mountain and kept thinking. The energy in the Yinyang Ocean can not only nourish the Dharma treasure of creation, but it also benefits Mount Yujing. This is killing two birds with one stone. Not bad, not bad. The problem of the heaven mystic realm was solved perfectly. Lin Feng was in a good mood, but there was one thing that made him feel strange. The people of the Underworld Hall knew about the existence of the Golden Ball of Light. Lin Feng originally thought that they would definitely spread the news and cause trouble for Xianmen Tianzong. Lin Feng had even made preparations to deal with them, but after a long time, there was still no movement. Chapter 642. The other party did not spread the news. The preparations that Lin Feng had made beforehand were all wasted. Looks like you're up to something big. Lin Feng shook his head with a smile. After solving the problem of the creation Dharma treasure embryo, the development of the mystic heaven realm had no more worries. It officially entered the development stage. After being screened, the people from other sects and factions were finally allowed to enter. Although Lin Feng's action of separating the Golden Ball of Light and the mystic heaven realm, as well as the battle, had ended in a short time, it had still alarmed some of the Essence Soul Realm bigwigs who were still lingering in the Kunlun mountain range. Everyone was bewildered, but no one knew the specifics. They could only make guesses in their hearts. Only the people on Jade Capital Mountain were shocked to discover that there was a magnificent black sea at the foot of the mountain. While they were baffled, they were also extremely shocked. The Yinyang Sea was temporarily designated as a forbidden area by Lin Feng. Apart from a limited number of people, no one else could enter. They could only look down at the white immortal mountain and the surging black sea with some awe. When Lin Feng returned to Jade Capital Mountain, Shi Tianhao asked curiously, Master, the invading enemy is from the Underworld Hall. That's right. He should be one of the top experts in the Underworld Hall. Lin Feng turned his head and looked towards his disciples. You guys might face this type of enemy in the future. You need to be prepared. Xiao Yan, Shi Tianhao, and the others nodded. Wang Lin said, that person has actually cultivated a Dao fruit. He must be a third-tier Essence Soul Realm expert. His Dharma powers are also quite strong. Even Mr. Feng's Mahayana Dharma treasure is not his match. Lin Feng nodded. That's right. This person cultivates the orthodox Dharma of the King of the Underworld. The Dao fruit he cultivated should be the legendary Life and Death Netherworld Dao fruit. The figure that emerged from his Dao fruit feels strange. Wang Lin frowned slightly. The moment it turned from black to white, the figure in the Dao fruit was like a real person. His dharmic powers and divine powers were extremely powerful. Lin Feng said faintly, that's the function of the Life and Death Nether Dao fruit. It can refine the cultivators he killed into evil souls, retaining their cultivation and power from when they were alive. In a sense, it is similar to the Netherworld puppet manipulation divine art created by the Yellow Springs True Water, but it is even more powerful. This is because the Life and Death Netherworld Dao fruit can allow evil souls to be reborn in a short period of time. In fact, the Yellow Springs sect was one of the legacies of the King of the Underworld, but it was completely destroyed at the end of the Middle Era. Everyone was shocked. A true resurrection. The Netherworld Nirvana spell, which was created by the Netherworld True Water, originated from the Netherworld sect, which had already been annihilated. Its secret technique, the Netherworld puppet manipulation, could refine a person's soul into a puppet that would obey the user's orders. The puppet could retain its memories and self-awareness from when it was alive. It would only listen to the user's orders. However, the Netherworld puppet manipulation divine art was only a soul without a physical body. Although its combat power was well preserved, and it could cast Dharma spells and divine powers when it was alive, there were still drawbacks. In particular, The netherworld puppet manipulation divine art could only refine cultivators below the essence soul realm into puppets. It was ineffective against those at the essence soul realm. As for the life and death nether Dao fruit, it could refine essence soul experts it killed into evil souls. In fact, the two life and death nether Dao fruits that Xianli had fought previously contained a long-bearded elder and a middle-aged Confucian scholar. Both of them were third-tier essence soul realm experts at the Dao integration realm. However, after they were killed, they were devoured and refined by the life and death nether Dao fruit. In the previous battle, they were temporarily resurrected to fight Xianli. This person's dharma has yet to be cultivated to the extreme. Lin Feng said indifferently. The two Dao integration experts that he refined into evil souls did not fully cast their powers. They were unable to condense their own Dao fruits. Otherwise, they would have been even stronger. Lin Feng put away the half-torn page and gained a deeper understanding of the underworld hall's dharma. The evil souls refined in the life and death nether Dao fruit can be transferred. I believe that these two evil souls were not personally refined by that person. Instead, they were inherited from someone else. That's why he was unable to use their full power. However, when his dharma is completely perfected and his divine powers and dharmic powers reach the peak, he should be able to control them freely. Even so, Wang Lin and the others were slightly shocked. Those were two Dao integration experts, yet they had been killed and refined into evil souls. The king of the underworld's dharma was indeed strange. Zhui said solemnly. That middle-aged Confucian scholar's dharma and divine powers vaguely have the shadow of the ancient Confucian sect. Lin Feng nodded. In the ancient war to depose the king of the underworld, all the factions in the divine land joined forces, including the Confucian sect. Although they overthrew the king of the underworld's rule in the end, the human cultivation world suffered great losses. It was then that the ancient Confucian sect fell into decline. This middle-aged Confucian scholar most likely perished in that war. Zhui sighed. Sacrificing oneself for righteousness is a role model for our generation. Xiao Yin frowned slightly. But master, where did that long-bearded elder come from? He seems to be a sword cultivator. Although he is inferior to master's heaven-crushing sword, his sword cultivation is already at the peak. But it's not the sword path of Shu Mountain. The Shu Mountain sword sect was domineering, but the phrase, all the swords in the world originate from Shu Mountain, was not a joke. Although the other sword sects never acknowledged it, the heavenly immortal sword Qi was the ancestor of all swords. In private, it was a consensus in the divine land. It was only when Lin Feng appeared with the heaven-crushing sword that this legend was broken. Before Lin Feng and the heaven-punishing sword, if one had to find a sword Dao technique that was independent of the sword Dao system derived from the immortal heaven sword Qi, at least not completely belonging to the Mount Shu sword Dao system, then there was only the emotionless heavenly sword and the greater void double extreme mystic origin sword art. These two sword Daos that originated from the void temple. That's why that long-bearded old man's sword path actually broke away from the path of Shushan's sword path. Yet it's shockingly strong, immediately attracting the attention of Xiao Yan and the rest. Although the long-bearded elder was defeated by the black glass sword, he did not use his fruit of the way. In fact, he did not use his full strength. Xianli stood behind Lin Feng, still expressionless and not saying a word. In ancient times, there was a super sect that was even more powerful than the Shu Mountain Sword sect and the Tempest Temple. It was almost comparable to the Taishu Temple. This sect was called the Elysium. Lin Feng said slowly. This was a long history, but it was not a secret. It was just that because it had been so long, most people only heard of the name, and did not know much about this sect. Xiao Yan, Shi Tianhao, and the others looked at each other. I think I've heard of the name, but that's all. Lin Feng said. It's not strange that you don't know about it, because the Elysium was destroyed in the last years of the ancient era. The last human emperor, who was the ruthless sovereign, was deposed. Then there was a war between the two worlds and the demon clan in the vast land of Tianhuang. It was an extremely tragic war. Even a super sect like the Elysium, which was comparable to the Taishu Temple, was completely destroyed. Lin Feng's expression didn't change, and he said calmly, the treasure of the gate of heaven is called the Great Wheel of Heaven. It is an extremely powerful magic treasure of the creation level. It can suppress the heavens and the realms, run amok in the 4 seas and 8 wastelands, and beat the ruthless emperor down from his throne. But even this Dharma treasure could not protect the Elysium from the great calamity. In the end, the Elysium was destroyed, and the great celestial wheel disappeared without a trace. Speaking of this, Lin Feng thought of something, and a slightly strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He did not continue. Xiao Yan and the others were immersed in the shock of the great calamity, and the great calamity in the last years of the ancient era. The Elysium was a super sect that could challenge the Taishu Temple. It had countless experts and had the great celestial wheel. But it also came to its end after a series of wars. Looking further back, the Grand Emperor, the previous human emperors, was one of the strongest. He ended the Archaic Epoch, the founder of the Archaic Epoch. He had the Grand Emperor Palace, and his magic power was unparalleled. But in the end, he fell in the great battle with the demon race. In the Battle of West Hill City, Lin Feng was awe-inspiring, and everyone in Xianmen Tianzong was also proud of him. But at this moment, when they heard Lin Feng talking about the history, everyone's mood slightly calmed down. People like Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi Wanglin, and Shi Tianhao were not depressed. Instead, their minds seemed to have been purified, and they became calmer. They were also more determined to improve their strength as soon as possible, and looked forward to the magnificent Great Era. The end of every old era, and the beginning of a new one undoubtedly contained the greatest danger, and the greatest opportunity. The eyes of the senior and junior brothers were full of pride. Seeing their expressions, Lin Feng could not help but laugh, and continued to say leisurely, "In the past, the most powerful Tao and mystique of the Elysium was called the Great Celestial Way, which was mysterious and profound. In addition to the Great Celestial Way, the Elysium actually had a secret sword Tao. This secret sword Tao was called the Great Nine Heavens Godly Sword, which could shake the heavens. At that time, it was even more powerful than the Great Celestial Way of the Taishu Temple's Heavenly Sword of Indifference and the Great Void Polar Mystic Sword technique. It was the sword Tao in the human cultivation world that was most likely to challenge the Heavenly Sword Qi of Shu Mountain." Lin Feng smiled. Moreover, whether the Heavenly Sword Qi or the Great Nine Heavens Godly Sword was stronger, and who was the first orthodox sword Tao of the human race, has always been a controversial matter. It was not until the Elysium was destroyed and lost in the long river of history that the Mount Shu sword sect could be considered to be the first sword sect in the Divine Land. Shi Tianhao nodded with understanding. That long-bearded old man was an expert who practiced the Great Nine Heavens Godly Sword in the Elysium. After he was killed by the King of the Underworld, or the successor of the King of the Underworld, he was refined into an evil soul? Lin Feng smiled and said, "Yes, that's right." Everyone nodded. "No wonder he's so strong." Lin Feng continued, "Speaking of this, I remember an interesting piece of news. In the past, when the Elysium already had the Great Wheel of Heaven, they had the intention to refine another Dharma treasure of the creation level." Yang Qing clicked her tongue slightly. Good heavens, they're still not satisfied with the Great Wheel of Heaven. They want to refine 2 Dharma treasures of the creation level? Zhu Yi said, "It's not strange. The Taishu Temple has the Haotian Mirror, and they also want to upgrade the Supreme Formation Breaking Drum and the Void Yin-Yang Bell to the creation level. They can't do it in a short time, so they find another way to combine the 2 treasures into one and refine the Taishu Temple. This is equivalent to having a second Dharma treasure of the creation level. No one will complain about having more if they can improve their strength." Lin Feng said, "The second Dharma treasure that the Elysium wants to refine is rumored to be based on the way of the Great Nine Heavens Godly Sword, condensing the Supreme Sword Will and combining it with countless treasures to refine a 9th Heaven Sword. However, this can only stay at the stage of imagination. Before the 9th Heaven Sword is completed, the Elysium was destroyed." Xiao Yan and the others shook their heads and felt that it was a pity. Xiao Yan's expression changed, and he crushed a sound transmission crystal. After a while, he looked shocked and turned to look at Lin Feng. "Master, there's news from outside. The Prime Minister of the Qin Kingdom, Wu Qingru, has resigned from Qin Emperor Shi Yu and returned to his hometown. Chapter 643. Wu Qingru was naturally not old. The so-called retiring and returning home was actually a way of saying that he was resigning. This legendary prime minister of the Great Qin Empire, who had stood in the royal court as a mortal, left in such a silent manner. Many people were caught off guard. What made people even more suspicious was that Qin Emperor Stonefeather did not try to keep Wu Qingru from resigning, letting go of his pillar of support just like that. He would naturally do things on the surface, such as leaving a memorial but not releasing it, but anyone could see that Qin Emperor Stonefeather did not mind Wu Qingru leaving, and was even somewhat happy to see it happen. This made people speculate that there was a conflict between the ruler and the minister of the Great Qin, and that there was an irreconcilable conflict. Qin Emperor Stonefeather naturally could not abdicate, so the one to leave was Wu Qingru. When Lin Feng received the news, he was not particularly surprised. Instead, a look of understanding appeared on his face. Wu Qingru leaving the Great Qin had verified his conjecture. His conjecture was confirmed, but Lin Feng was not very happy. He only shook his head slightly. Brother still has a long way to go. Lin Feng had some conjectures before, but now that he knew that Wu Qingru had resigned, he did not particularly care. But when Chu Yang, who was in Sand Continent City, heard the news, he was completely stunned. After a while he came back to his senses, a bitter smile on his face. Well, it's all a mess. Ever since he felt that he had lived again, Chu Yang's most feared target, as well as his imaginary enemy, was Wu Qingru. This was because in that world that he could not tell if it was a memory or a dream. The reason why his sect, Heavens Beyond Mountain, had been destroyed was because of Wu Qingru's schemes, causing Heavens Beyond Mountain to become cannon fodder between the Shushan Sword sect and the Great Zhou dynasty. Now, Prince Liang Qian of the Great Zhou dynasty had not been assassinated at Kunlun Mountain, and there had not been any intense conflict between the Great Zhou dynasty and the Shushan Sword sect. But Chu Yang still did not dare to relax at all, because Wu Qingru's previous arrangements had already begun to take effect. Heavens Beyond Mountain had become a vassal of Shushan, causing his position to be very dangerous. Of course, Beyond Heaven Mountain was not the only power that depended on the Shushan Sword sect. However, Beyond Heaven Mountain's dependence on the Shushan Sword sect had been single-handedly designed by Wu Qingru. At the same time, it was very convenient for him to control this chess piece to achieve his own goals. Perhaps Wu Qingru had set up other chess pieces, but Chu Yang had no way of knowing or confirming such things. It was too difficult to find proof. For the time being, he had only set up Heavens Beyond Mountain as a chess piece. However, if Wu Qingru wanted the Shushan Sword sect to have a conflict with another power, Heavens Beyond Mountain might repeat the same mistake and become a thorn between the two powers. However, now that Wu Qingru had resigned as Great Qin's prime minister and had disappeared, Chu Yang felt quite confused and did not know where he should go. If Wu Qingru was truly dead, then Chu Yang could breathe a sigh of relief. But who knew where Wu Qingru had gone? What was he plotting? Was Beyond Heaven Mountain still part of his plan? These were all unknown, which gave Chu Yang a headache. In the original situation, Wu Qingru was in the light and he was in the dark. Wu Qingru did not know that there was an unremarkable junior, a foundation establishment cultivator, who was secretly interfering with his plans. That was why Chu Yang had enough leeway to warn the Great Zhou prince, Liang Qian, in advance, and cause the assassination attempt at the Kunlun mountain range to fail. However, now that Wu Qingru had also gone from being in the light to being in the dark, Chu Yang suddenly felt like he was in the dark. Chu Yang left his courtyard and walked on the streets of Sand Continent City. The streets were bustling with people, but to Chu Yang, it was as if they did not exist. He walked silently by himself, all the way out of Sand Continent City, and into the barren desert. Chu Yang stepped on the quicksand and squinted at the scorching sun above his head. Finally, he stopped and stood there motionlessly. After a long time, Chu Yang suddenly moved like a statue. He twisted his neck and looked into the distance. On the horizon, he could vaguely see the undulating mountain range. That was the direction of the Kunlun mountain range. Chu Yang let out a long sigh. Everything is different now. This world was completely different from his memories, or rather, the world in his dreams. Actually, it's pretty good. Chu Yang suddenly laughed. Nothing happened in Beyond Heaven Mountain. Qinggu has also turned misfortune into fortune, and there are almighty divine arts practitioners taking care of her. Out of the 3 things that I am most worried about, 2 of them have been resolved. Isn't this what I have always dreamed of? He looked in the direction of Kunlun Mountain and muttered to himself. All these changes actually stem from the master of Xian Gate, from his sudden rise and extremely powerful strength. Wu Qingru has disappeared. No one knows when he will appear next and what he will do. Chu Yang suddenly laughed at himself. Isn't it because I am not like the master of Xian Gate, who has almighty divine arts that can turn the world around with one hand? Otherwise, I would have slapped Wu Qingru to death and ended everything once and for all. To forge iron, one needs to be strong. Originally, it was because time was tight and I didn't have enough time. Now, even though I don't know how much time I have, how can I not make use of it and improve myself as much as possible? Chu Yang straightened his back. His entire person was like a long sword that was going to pierce through the heavens. He stood proudly in the wilderness and pointed at the sky above his head. The 3 things that I am most worried about, or rather, the 3 things that I am most regretful about in my memories and dreams, I will personally complete the last one. It is also to protect Beyond Heaven Mountain and Qinggu. Chu Yang looked in the direction of Kunlun Mountain. The person he missed the most was there. Ever since he had woken up, he had been searching for her. He clearly knew where the girl was, but until today he had never had the chance to see her with his own eyes. Guarding Kunlun Mountain Sand Continent City, besides building a good relationship with Xianmen Tianzong, Chu Yang had always hoped to have the chance to meet the person he missed. But now he suddenly changed his mind. He did not want to be like a hunting dog chasing after a bone. He did not want to chase after his unrecognizable memories. Since everything was different, he might as well forge a new path. Even if the road ahead was full of thorns, even if he would break his head and bleed. Wu Qingru, I want to thank you. Your sudden disappearance made me anxious, but it also made me determined. The sharpness around Chu Yang suddenly disappeared. It was as if he had turned into an ordinary, lazy youth. He stretched his back and smiled. Even though I don't know if you will appear again, or when you will next, when you do, I will be completely different. Thank you for giving me time. I will use this time not only to race against you, but also to race against this completely different world. Chu Yang's spirit and appearance were completely new. He was still the same person, and his cultivation was still the same. However, it was as if he had been reborn. He once again looked in the direction of Kunlun Mountain and said resolutely, Qinggu, wait for me. I will definitely find you. Chu Yang did not know that on his body, a talisman had flashed for a moment. In the sky above the Kunlun Mountain range, at the peak of Jade Capital Mountain, Lin Feng looked thoughtfully at the empty void. The corners of his mouth curved into a smile. It was just a spur-of-the-moment decision to leave a mark for you. Who would have thought that you were still thinking about my disciple? Beside him stood a young girl dressed in purple. There was a Tai Chi pattern on her lapel. Her appearance was picturesque. It was Luo Qinggu. Master, what's wrong? Luo Qinggu asked curiously. Lin Feng turned his head and said indifferently, Xiao Wu, you are still young and may not understand many things. However, it is precisely because of your young age that I have to warn you about some things in advance. Only then can I guarantee that you will not be deceived by others. Luo Qinggu nodded her little head. Please enlighten me, master. Lin Feng said. In this world, there are some adult men who favor young girls like you. They will always think of ways to deceive and harm you. When you meet such people, you must stay at a respectful distance. Don't listen to their flowery words. If he is persistent, teach him a lesson. If you really can't handle it, you can come and find me. Your senior brothers are not just for show. Luo Qinggu listened attentively. Then she nodded her head vigorously and answered crisply. Yes, master. Xiao Wu will remember. Don't listen to the flowery words of outsiders. Stay at a respectful distance from such people. If he is persistent, teach him a lesson. If Xiao Wu can't beat him and doesn't dare to disturb master, Xiao Wu will find my senior brothers to beat him up. In the desert, Chu Yang, who had just made up his mind and changed his appearance, suddenly shivered for no reason. He looked at his surroundings in bewilderment. He was surrounded by a scorching desert, and the sun was shining brightly above his head. He couldn't help but feel a little confused. What the hell? Putting aside the fact that I'm successful in my cultivation, how could I be shivering in such hot weather? On Jade Capital Mountain, Lin Feng looked at Luo Qinggu and smiled. Relax, it's better to be safe than sorry. Since you are my disciple, I will naturally look after you. He led Luo Qinggu to the edge of a cliff at the top of the Jade Capital Mountain. At the foot of the mountain below, the black waves of the Yin and Yang Sea kept slapping against the precipitous cliff, setting off waves after waves. It looked rather dangerous. As Luo Qinggu looked at the Black Sea, she felt a sense of familiarity. Lin Feng said, Xiao Wu, keep the sword intent in your heart. Keep your understanding of the sword in mind. Luo Qinggu nodded. Over the past few days, other than carefully studying the Tao, she had been following Lin Feng's guidance. She had gradually abandoned the saber Tao she learned from the Luo clan, and carefully studied the concept of the sword Tao. Lin Feng did not teach her any specific sword Tao divine powers or cultivation techniques. He only gave her a general direction, allowing Luo Qinggu to ponder over it herself, and conclude the most suitable path for her. With Luo Qinggu's present cultivation level and her understanding of the heaven and earth great Tao, it was impossible for her to independently figure out the concept of the sword Tao, even if she had extraordinary perceptivity. However, under Lin Feng's guidance, she was not required to achieve anything immediately. Instead, she needed to have a prototype. Even if it was not mature, it could be slowly perfected. The crux was that it had to be compatible with her. Luo Qinggu closed her eyes and entered cogitation. Lin Feng's perception landed on her as he imprinted the sword intent that Luo Qinggu had figured out into his mind. Then Lin Feng stretched out his palm and grabbed at the Yin-Yang Sea beneath the cliff. Immediately, a slender water line was pulled into the air from the Black Sea and landed in Lin Feng's palm. Chapter 644. The most Yin and coldest, gloomy and pitch-black seawater turned into a long line of water, passing through thousands of meters of space, and was pulled up by Lin Feng from the Yin-Yang Sea at the foot of the mountain. Lin Feng clenched his hand, as if he was holding the hilt of a long sword, and then the Yin cold black water constantly condensed in his palm. Very quickly, a 3-foot-long, sparkling and translucent black longsword appeared in Lin Feng's hand. The quality of the longsword seemed to be forged from pure black ice, without any impurities, but the blade was pitch black, without any sword light. Not only did the blade not reflect light, but the black ice blade was like a black hole, faintly swallowing all light that came into contact with it, so that the space where the sword was actually seemed to be a black curtain like the original darkness of the universe. Only endless Yin-cold energy came out of the sword, making one's heart palpitate. This sword is called Profound Che. As Lin Feng spoke, he handed the black ice sword in his hand to Luo Qinggu. The sword was not completely forged. When it was in Luo Qinggu's hand, the sword intent in her heart and the Profound Che sword became one. It was truly completed. A not strong but profound aura flowed out of the black ice sword. Luo Qinggu opened her eyes and carefully tried to figure out the principles and artistic conception within. She murmured, although it can't even be considered a magic tool of the Zhuji state, it seems to have unlimited potential. Its sword intent is mysterious and leads straight to the Great Way. Lin Feng said lightly, this sword will follow you for your entire life. As you grow, this sword will also grow together with you. Just like how you yourself have infinite potential, this sword also has the same principle. How high you can go in the future depends on you. Luo Qinggu held the Profound Che sword, bowed to Lin Feng. Xiao Wu will definitely diligently cultivate. Lin Feng said with a smile. Logically, after you reach foundation establishment, you can refine it yourself, but if this sword can follow you to foundation establishment, it is a good thing for both you and it. This is your natal sword. I'm just helping you condense it. It's not a treasure I'm bestowing upon you. If any of your fellow brothers and sisters reach foundation establishment, I'll bestow upon them a golden elixir period magical artifact. When someone forms their gold core, they will be bestowed with a Yuanying realm magic tool. If they form their nascent soul, there will be a magic tool waiting for them. You are naturally no exception. This profound Che sword is not included. Luo Qinggu smiled and said, "Thank you, master." Lin Feng said, "So, you just need to practice hard." Xiao Wu, look at the yin-yang sea under your feet. How do you feel? It's scary, but it feels familiar. Luo Qinggu turned around and looked at the Black Sea below. Although she was far away, she could still feel the power of the profound Che sword. It was extremely cold, and completely dark. A smile appeared at the corner of Lin Feng's mouth, and it was as warm as the sun. You have a pure yin body, so you can naturally gather the yin qi between heaven and earth into your body and purify it into pure yin qi. Therefore, when you practice yin-attributed Taoist arts, you will be able to travel 1,000 miles in a day, far surpassing ordinary people. And the seawater of the yin-yang sea is also the rare pure yin water in the world. Every drop of seawater is actually formed by the condensation of a large amount of pure yin qi. If others practice in the seawater, they won't be able to withstand the dense yin qi. At least, it's not beneficial to their practice, and it will even lower their practice efficiency. But for Xiao Wu, it's the most suitable place for you to practice. Lin Feng said with a smile, although the spirit qi on Jade Capital Mountain is abundant, when it comes to your body, this pure yin sea is more suitable for you to practice. Luo Qinggu nodded. Xiao Wu understands. Then, master, how long will Xiao Wu stay in the sea every day? Lin Feng turned to look at her, and slowly said, it's not how long you stay in the sea every day, but always stay in there, until you reach the limit of what you can bear. Master? Thinking that she would always be soaking in the seawater, the little lowly's face immediately turned a little green. Lin Feng said indifferently, Xiao Wu, master, and you hit it off. Although we haven't known each other for a long time, I still have some understanding of your temperament. You have outstanding talent, but you have a lazy temperament. Although you have experienced many changes, and have the desire to improve, your temperament is still not stable enough. An overly comfortable life may gradually make you return to the state of your childhood. With master here, no one will make you angry, and no one will dare to bully you. But you must always remember the reason why you practice Taoism, and you must constantly push yourself. Luo Qinggu became silent, and seriously pondered over Lin Feng's words. Lin Feng's words were not aimless, but he really spoke from his feelings. If not for the existence of Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong, Luo Qinggu would have followed her own predetermined fate. The heaven-accumulating dark soul pearl was broken, and she was abandoned by her family. She suffered a huge blow, and tasted the coldness of human nature. Perhaps she would have truly matured. After going through this threshold, the girl's temperament and willpower became tenacious. Although she did not have outstanding bone structure, it was not impossible for her to live a different life. But now, the appearance of Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong not only improved the little lowly's talent and bone structure, but also gave her a new support, a support that was much stronger than the Luo family. She was Lin Feng's youngest disciple. She was lively and innocent, and she was obedient and cute in front of people she knew. As long as she was not provoked, she was actually not a naughty child. This made Xiao Yan, Shi Tianhao, and the other senior and junior brothers pamper her. Although it was different from blood kinship, there was no doubt that Luo Qinggu had a new emotional attachment, and it also allowed her to return to the environment where she was pampered during her childhood. The previous incident with the Luo family was a huge blow to her, but with the gradual passage of time, the scars would eventually be healed. Especially since her talent was even more outstanding, and she had become Lin Feng's personal disciple. The Luo family would definitely try to repair the cracks. So to put it simply, although she had experienced a setback, it was very likely that the little lowly's temperament would become lazy again. After all, this setback was actually very short, and the little lowly's luck changed very quickly. Before she had the time to carefully experience the ups and downs of life, she had a smooth journey once again. Luo Qinggu took a deep breath and looked at Lin Feng with her big eyes. Master is right. I have already wasted too much of my precious time in the past, and now my cultivation is far behind my senior brothers. I should seize every opportunity one have to cultivate hard. It's best that you understand this principle. Lin Feng revealed a smile of approval. Luo Qinggu said, I will definitely work hard to cultivate. Before she could finish her sentence, Luo Qinggu suddenly felt like she was flying through the clouds. When she looked down, it was no longer the solid ground of the Jade Capital Mountain, but air. The 10,000 feet deep abyss beneath her was the turbulent black surface of the Yin-Yang Sea. She heard Lin Feng's laughter. Since you understand the principle, then cut the crap. Hurry up and go down. Master. The little lowly only had time to let out a cry of surprise before she fell freely towards the sea below. She already had a good qi cultivation. Although she could not walk on air, she was proficient in escape techniques. However, her magic power was restrained by Lin Feng, and she could only watch as she fell into the sea with a plop, without any ladle-like image. Falling from a height of 10,000 feet, even if it was seawater below, if one's torso hit the surface of the sea, one's internal organs would also be shattered. Naturally, Lin Feng would not really be that heartless. The moment she fell into the sea, he protected Luo Qinggu. However, the little lowly did not feel good either, and was instantly drenched. Luo Qinggu floated up from the water and looked up pitifully. Master, at least let little Wu be prepared. Little Wu has never swum before. Smiling, Lin Feng said, You won't drown to death. Stop talking nonsense and hurry up. Luo Qinggu was in the middle of the Black Sea. She immediately felt the endless pure Yin Qi surging into her body. Even with her pure Yin body constitution, she felt that she was going to be frozen for a moment due to the cold Yin power. The little lowly did not dare to be negligent. She adjusted her body and directly sat cross-legged in the sea. She formed a sword art with both hands and placed them on her knees. She held the profound Che sword with both hands and circulated the magic power around Luo Qingwu's body. She immediately sat steadily in the waves. Although her small body rose and fell with the waves, it was still stable. Silently, she endured the cleansing of the Yin-Yang Sea's water and guided the spiritual energy into her body. Standing on Mount Yujing, Lin Feng looked down and smiled. He nodded. Not bad, not bad. You've quickly found the trick and are on the right track. He left a magic power imprint on Luo Qingwu's body so that he could protect his disciple when necessary. At the same time, he could also monitor Luo Qingwu's cultivation state. At this moment, he could feel the boundless pure Yin energy being absorbed into Luo Qingwu's body continuously. In almost this short period of time, the little lowly was already about to break through the 8th level of Qi Disciple and rush to the 9th level of Qi Disciple. Not only the pure Yin energy, even the cold energy and dark energy in the Black Sea water were also slowly being absorbed and refined by Luo Qingwu. After all, Luo Qingwu's current cultivation level was still low. As time passed, the speed at which she refined the spiritual energy would not be able to keep up with the speed at which the spiritual energy invaded her body. As time passed, she would reach her limit. At that time, she would need Lin Feng to watch over her and fish her out. However, after careful observation, Lin Feng found that the little fellow's cultivation results were even better than what he had expected. Lin Feng nodded and was a little emotional. I have to say, with a high foundation, cultivation is really easy in the early stages. Luo Qingwu's cultivation was on the right track. Lin Feng only needed to pay attention to her from time to time. He left the cliff and strolled on the mountain peak. He came to the disciple's abode that was already empty. Lin Feng looked at the disciple's abode, and then flicked his finger lightly. The Yin and Yang life and death formation appeared in the sky. However, it did not fully activate. It only displayed the eternal instant change. The light of the formation landed on the disciple's abode. Lin Feng flicked his finger repeatedly. Waves of magic power were injected into the Yin and Yang life and death formation, and the disciple's abode. From the formation, a small amount of eternal God light and instant divine sand flowed out. Then, they set up a formation that contained the eternal instant change in the disciple's abode. Very soon, the small formation completely fused with the disciple's abode. The flow of time in the disciple's abode changed instantly. Different rooms had different flow of time. some accelerated by 1 time, some accelerated by 3 times, some accelerated by 5 times, some accelerated by 10 times, and so on. Chapter 645. Lin Feng remodeled the disciples' abode again. On the basis of gathering spiritual energy, he added the mystery of time change. This place can no longer be called a disciples' abode. Lin Feng smiled. From now on, it will be called Universal Light Hall. Other than the little lowly who was still cultivating in the Yin-Yang Sea, all of Lin Feng's direct disciples, including Li Yuanfang, received his voice transmission and came to the front of the Hall of Universe together. They carefully observed and immediately discovered the changes within, and could not help but click their tongues in wonder. Lin Feng said, "From now on, the rules will be set. The foundation disciples in the Cloud Peaks will undergo a big assessment regularly. Those who pass will become a true disciple. In addition to the big assessment, there will be a small assessment from time to time. Those who pass the assessment will be allowed to enter the Universal Light Hall to cultivate for a period of time as a reward." Xiao Yan and the others nodded. "That's good. It will encourage the disciples to work hard." Zhui thought for a moment and asked, "Master, in this way, won't the gap between the strong and the strong increase?" Lin Feng shook his head. "Just like the big assessment, the focus is on the potential of the disciples, temperament and comprehensive level, not the current level of cultivation." Zhui looked carefully at each room of the Universal Light Hall and nodded. The acceleration time in each room is different. The choice of which room to enter can also test the disciples' grasp and confidence in themselves. Lin Feng said, "That's right. In addition, the foundation disciples need to go through an assessment before they can enter the room to cultivate, while the true disciples under you can enter at any time. This is also a right enjoyed by the true disciples." Zhu Yi and the others nodded. Lin Feng put his hands behind his back and walked to the side. Xiao Yan and the others followed him. The group stopped not far from the Universal Light Hall. Up. Lin Feng secretly held 3 construction medallions in his hand. After activating them, 3 streaks of light flew out. One of them landed far below the mysterious heaven treasure tree, and on the other side was a small building. As for the other 2 lights, one of them landed next to the heaven returning gold pavilion and the sutras pavilion, revealing a majestic hall. On the horizontal board of the hall, there were 3 words Hall of Divine Craftsmanship, which was transformed from the construction token of the refining pavilion. Another ray of light landed beside the Time Light Hall, and turned into a huge hall. Although it wasn't as big as the All Heavens main hall, it was much bigger than the other buildings. Xiao Yan and the others curiously sized up this hall, walking in a single file, feeling the mysteries of the hall. After a while, they all revealed a smile of sudden understanding on their faces. "Master has good methods. Even the few of us can use this hall right now." Lin Feng smiled and said, "It won't be needed soon, but it's just right for this junior disciple." He looked at Xiao Yan and the others and said, "Go back and teach your disciples well. Don't slack off." Everyone nodded and turned to leave. Xiao Yan was left behind by Lin Feng. "Let's go, Xiao Yan. Follow me back to the Heaven Gold Pavilion." When the master and disciple arrived at the pill refining room, Lin Feng turned around and smiled. "How's the nourishment of the magic treasure I gave you?" Xiao Yan smiled. "We're getting along well." As he spoke, he formed a seal with both hands. A 5-colored stream of light rose from the top of his head. Within the stream of light, an ancient black medallion floated in the air. It was the primordial spirit magic treasure, the 5 divine medallions. 5 words were engraved on the medallion according to the positions of the 5 elements. Silently, light flowed on each word. If one looked closely at the light, they would see dense patterns flowing and fluctuating, containing great power. The 5 words were Tai, Cheng, Xia, Gu and Shi. They were the honorific titles of the 5 powerful human sovereigns from the immemorial age and the ancient age. They each carried the power and will of the 5 sovereigns and then merged. Although each power and will seemed a little superficial compared to the true orthodoxy of the human sovereigns, one could vaguely see the network within it if one studied it carefully. Although this treasure was only a spirit-nurturing grade magic treasure, its power was extremely powerful, far beyond ordinary. It could intimidate the heavens, and it could attack and defend at the same time. Not to mention its offensive power, its defensive power was definitely one of the top among spirit-nurturing grade magic treasures. Xiao Yan had the 5 great true fires, so the destructive power of the celestial flaming lotus was extremely terrifying. However, he was brave and would rather break than bend. Sometimes he would put himself in danger, so Lin Feng specially gave him this treasure to protect himself. At the same time, Xiao Yan used the 5 great true fires to nourish the 5 divine medallions, which was also beneficial to this magic treasure. The nether evil flame nourished the Tai pattern. The mysterious heaven tribulation flame nourished the Chong pattern. The solar true fire nourished the Gu pattern. The Nanmingli fire nourished the Xia pattern, and the pure Yang true fire nourished the Shi pattern. Xiao Yan laughed bitterly. I don't even dare to refine this treasure in front of Zhen Er. Her ancient bloodline has the Nanmingli fire, but I used it to refine Xia Huang's power and will. What is this? Lin Feng said with a smile. Of the 7 great true fires, the Nanmingli fire is a fire that combines yin and yang. In terms of blazing heat, it is inferior to the true fire of the sun and the true fire of pure yang. Because the ancient emperor possesses the Nanmingli fire, that's why the person who refined these 5 divine badges worshipped him in the south. Moreover, although the ancient word pattern on these 5 god badges is indeed the inheritance of the ancient emperor's power, it is the same path as the ancient emperor's saber. It has nothing to do with the Nanmingli fire at all. The ancient emperor's orthodoxy is so profound that cultivating the Nanmingli fire divine art is only a part of it. Xiao Yan chuckled. You still have to be careful. I heard that in ancient times, although the ancient emperor and Xia Huang were separated by the king of the underworld, they knew each other. When Xia Huang was on the throne, the ancient emperor's cultivation was still low, and he had some disagreements with Xia Huang's people. One is water and one is fire. It's hard to avoid people making assumptions. Lin Feng laughed and shook his head. Don't learn from those boring people. Lin Feng flicked his finger, and a stream of light landed in front of Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan caught the thing and saw a translucent pill the size of an infant's fist, completely snow-white in color, appearing to be translucent appear in front of him. The core of the elixir was faintly black, and the black core flickered in and out of existence. It was as if a hole was constantly being repaired. Great elixir. Xiao Yan's nose twitched slightly, and he inhaled the elixir's fragrance into his body. He was instantly moved when he felt the medicinal effects. The elixir that Lin Feng gave him was the Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixir. After listening to Lin Feng's introduction of the effects, Xiao Yan rubbed the elixir with his fingers and muttered, Master, although the effects of this elixir are heaven-defying, I'm afraid there's still a limit to its effects. Lin Feng said, That's right. However, some disciples actually have great potential, but like your 3rd junior brother, they are limited by their innate bones. This elixir is suitable for them. I have some finished products here. Take them and study them. For the time being, you should focus on refining the Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixir, and strive to refine more. Xiao Yan took a few Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixirs from Lin Feng, and immediately opened the outer core furnace to try refining them. Ever since Yu Hongyan found the ascending spirit grass in the ancient desolate sea world, Lin Feng had cultivated it in the Medicine Valley. It had already reached a certain scale, and could withstand the consumption of large-scale refining of elixirs. After Xiao Yan worked hard day and night, although the success rate of refining elixirs was lower than other elixirs, there was still a considerable number of Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixirs out of the furnace. Lin Feng had also carried out some experiments during this period. Overall, the results were satisfactory. The Heaven Spirit Replenishing Elixir had a limit on improving one's bone foundation. When a cultivator took this elixir, it was effective once. After taking it, the bone foundation would be improved by 1 point, and the maximum improvement was 7 points. That was, people with 6 points of bone foundation could be improved to 7 points, and people with 7 points of bone foundation would be slightly strengthened, but they would not be able to improve to 8 points. People with 8 points of bone foundation would not be able to take it. 7 points of bone foundation might seem inconspicuous. Compared to people like Shi Tianhao, Yang Qing, and Luo Qinggu, it was almost trash. But in fact, it was already very good in the eyes of the general public. Other people did not have the system like Lin Feng, which could see the potential values of comprehension, will, and blessing. The talent of others could be quantified and tested, mainly on the bone foundation. Comprehension and will could only be seen roughly. The overall evaluation standard of the human cultivation world excluded the elite Taishu temple. In terms of bone foundation talent, 6 points was considered excellent and had great potential for training. 7 points was considered a talent worthy of attention, and it would cause competition among the middle-level sections. 8 points was considered a genius, and the number was already extremely rare. No matter which sect, they would be highly valued and focused on training. 9 points could be considered a monster, and it could be said to be rare in the world. Even if the Taishu temple was included, the number was extremely limited. As for 10 points, it could only be laughed at. Using the recent 1,000 years as the dividing line, among the cultivators born within 1,000 years, only Shi Tianhao could be sure of the value of 10 points of bone foundation by Lin Feng. Lin Daohan and Shi Tianyi both had masters who could not see the real values, so they were considered suspicious. Wang Lin's bone foundation potential value was 5 points, which was judged by Lin Feng to be unqualified. But that was compared to the standards that the system let him choose personal disciples. In the eyes of the general public, it could only be said to be relatively ordinary, and not outstanding enough. This young man was a bit unlucky. Not only was his overall development a late-stage power player, but even his bone foundation talent was also late-stage power. Wang Lin's initial spirit toughness and strength were actually not bad, but this was a limited advantage that could only be manifested after training deeply. When he went to the Hengyu sect for the test without qi cultivating stage, he could not show this small advantage, so he naturally became a tragedy and was treated as a pure waste. After all, Wang Lin's physical qi and blood were ordinary, and the body's meridian capacity, the strength of meridian, the sensitivity of the spirit to sense and communicate with spirit qi, and the spirit qi affinity to guide spirit qi into the body, these basic abilities were all a mess at the beginning. Improving the overall bone foundation by 1 point didn't seem to be much, but this point was actually a qualitative change in many cases. Especially when a cultivator was building their spirit platform in the foundation establishment stage, it was more likely to play a decisive role. Moreover, improving the bone foundation would also greatly save a cultivator's time in the early stages of cultivation, reduce the difficulty, and increase the efficiency. This was especially important for Lin Feng. Not only did he improve 1 or 2 points, but he could also improve it on a large scale. The threshold for him, Xianmen Tianzong, to accept disciples was not low to begin with. Even if the disciple's bone foundation was not too outstanding, the other 3 aspects of potential would definitely be good. Others mainly focused on the bone foundation, but there were many dark horses in Lin Feng's side. Now that he improved the overall bone foundation, the overall potential of the sect's disciples would immediately go up a level. Chapter 646. Although he was still in the Yuanying stage, Xiaoyan was already the #1 alchemist in Xianmen Tianzong. Of course, in the eyes of others, including Xiaoyan himself, this statement excluded Lin Feng. But of course Lin Feng himself is well aware in his heart that Xiaoyan's pill refining level indeed surpasses his master. This thing is not completely the same as a cultivator's cultivation level. People with high cultivation level, their pill refining level may not be stronger than people with low cultivation level. It involves many factors. Therefore, Lin Feng naturally entrusted the alchemy room to Xiaoyan, and Xiaoyan also enjoyed it. If it were someone else, this might delay their own cultivation. But for Xiaoyan, he had to constantly study the power of the true fire during the alchemy process, which was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But soon, Xiaoyan had to come out of the alchemy room, because Xiao Zhener was about to leave the mountain. She and Xiaoyan had reunited in the void battlefield for a long time, and she couldn't bear to be separated, so she decided to go back to Yujing Mountain with Xiaoyan. Strictly speaking, the girl was even suspected of running away from home. In the past few days, the ancient brush spirit was asked by Xiao Zhener's family to come to Kunlun Mountain to visit. Her words were very polite, but the meaning was clear. She was going to bring Xiao Zhener back to her family. It was not that she was clearly against the relationship between Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhener, but it was more beneficial for Xiao Zhener to return to her family for cultivation. The ancient emperor had high hopes for Xiao Zhener and had a special training plan. Although Yujing Mountain was a rare place, it was not as good as Luo Qinggu. Just like the Yinyang Sea was the most suitable place for Luo Qinggu to cultivate, Xiao Zhener's family also had the most suitable environment and resources for her to cultivate. Of course, the ancient emperor's bloodline indeed still has doubts and divergences regarding the relationship between Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhen. The Battle of West Hill City affected not only the divine land, but also the ancient emperor. The unexpected rise of Xianmen Tianzong forced them to think about more things. Lin Feng didn't care too much about this. It was completely voluntary. If Xiao Zhener wanted to stay, her father would come to him in person, and Lin Feng would also support his eldest disciple to the end. If Xiao Zhener wanted to leave, Lin Feng would not force her to stay. Xiao Yan was quite open-minded. He gently combed Xiao Zhener's hair, smiled and said, "Don't worry, wait for me at home. I will go to your clan again. This time, it will be an honorable visit." Xiao Zhener also smiled faintly. Xiao Yan Gich has to hurry up and cultivate. Zhen has heard that among Senior Lin's direct disciples, no matter if it's recently forming nascent soul or before forming core, Xiao Yan Gich, this big senior brother, is not the fastest one. The girl's smile was a bit mischievous. Xiao Yan's face became slightly hot after being teased by her. He coughed and said, "The ones in front are nothing. I will wait for them in Yuanshan." "Eldest disciple, don't make us wait too long." Shi Tianhao laughed and said. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others all shook their heads and laughed. Everyone cupped their hands at Xiao Zhener and said, "Miss Zhener, take care." Xiao Zhener also bowed and said, "Brothers, take care too." She looked at the little girl in Xiao Yan's arms and said, "Tong, take care too." Lin Tong looked at Xiao Zhener with tears in her eyes and asked, "Mother, are you really leaving?" Xiao Zhener smiled and said, "Godmother will come back to see Tonger in the future." She wasn't trying to coax the child, it was the truth. As her cultivation level grew, she had more and more power in the clan. Plus, as Xianmen Tianzong's influence grew day by day and Xiao Yan's personal strength grew stronger, Xiao Zhener had a relatively easy time. Lin Tong saw that Xiao Zhener had made up her mind, so she turned her face away and pouted. Then let's go. Tonger won't miss you." Even though she said that, she reached out her chubby little hand and tightly grabbed Xiao Zhener's sleeve. She bit her lips and tears were about to fall down. These days, Xiao Yan was busy cultivating and breaking through the Yuanying realm. After forming his nascent soul, he was busy with the Xiantian realm's affairs and alchemy. Xiao Zhener and Lin Tong, on the other hand, were very close. When Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhener saw this, they hurriedly pacified the little girl together. With great difficulty, they managed to coax the little girl to stop her tears. She looked pitifully at Xiao Zhener. "Mother, you have to come back often to see Tong and father." Xiao Zhener touched her head and said, "Godmother will." After saying goodbye to Lin Tong, Xiao Zhener came to Lin Feng and solemnly bowed and said, "Senior Lin, thank you for your care and guidance these days. I can't thank you enough." She paused and said, "When I go back this time, I will have a good talk with my father." This was the reason why she was willing to leave the mountain with the ancient brush spirit. Lin Feng smiled and said, "Miss Zhener, you are too polite. Please send my regards to your father." Xiao Zhener bowed and said, "I will definitely bring senior's regards. I will leave the ancient emperor saber to you." Lin Feng waved his hand and said, "You can take it with you." Xiao Zhener hesitated and said, "I dare not refuse a gift from an elder. Thank you, Senior Lin." The ancient brush spirit smiled bitterly at the side. After sending Xiao Zhener and the ancient brush spirit away, Lin Feng smiled and looked at the disappointed Xiao Yan and said, "I have given you the betrothal gift. Whether you can get a wife or not is up to you." Xiao Yan took a deep breath and nodded and said, Don't worry, master. Since I promised Zhener, I will visit her openly in the future. I will not go back on my words. Lin Feng smiled and pointed at Zhu Yi and the others and said, You guys, I am also waiting. Zhu Yi smiled and said, A graceful lady is a gentleman's desire, but it is not something that can be rushed. She must be like eldest senior brother and Miss Zhener, who are in love with each other and live in harmony. Xiao Zhener's departure from the mountain was just a small interlude. Xianmen Tianzong, which was already on the right track, would continue to develop normally. After the initial development of the Xianmen realm, it became more and more popular. With the support of the Qin dynasty, the immigration plan was also officially launched. However, the first to enter the Xianmen realm were the Xiao clan led by Xiao Yan's grandfather, old clan leader Xiao, and some of Wang Lin's clansmen. They had left their homes and lived in the Sand Continent. Now that they had immigrated to the Xianmen realm, there was naturally nothing to miss. Although the Xianmen realm was newly developed, it was originally very barren and far less prosperous than the Sand Continent city. However, Lin Feng had once again built a teleportation formation, which facilitated the transportation between the entrance of the Xianmen realm and the Cloud Mirror City as well as the Sand Continent city. Secondly, people with foresight like old clan leader Xiao could see the importance and huge potential of the Xianmen realm to Xianmen Tianzong. The earlier they entered, the more opportunities they would have for development. Similarly, there were also some of Shi Tianhao's clansmen. When Shi Zongyue came to visit, he met Shi Zhongtian. Speaking of which, Shi Zongyue and Shi Zhongtian could be considered old acquaintances. However, Shi Zongyue was much older and had reached the primordial spirit realm a long time ago. Before Shi Zhongtian entered the void battlefield, he was only a Yuanying cultivator. However, Shi Zongyue also congratulated Shi Zhongtian on his return. Shi Zhongtian also wanted to return to the Shi clan to take a look. Right now, there were some old brothers that he liked to take care of the situation. After Shi Zhongtian had recovered from his injuries, he immediately returned to the Shi clan's ancestral land. Shi Tianhao also accompanied him. Xianmen Tianzong's reputation was currently at its peak. The Shi clan naturally hoped to improve the relationship between the two sides and get closer to Xianmen Tianzong. However, Lin Feng imposed a certain limit on their application to enter the Xianmen realm. He didn't want the background of the Xianmen realm's immigrants to be too complicated. It would be best if they were from the secular world. It wouldn't be a problem if they produced cultivator clans in the future, but now he had to impose a limit. If cultivator clans that already had a foundation entered the Xianmen realm, even if they restrained themselves, they would appear to be superior to the ordinary immigrants. For example, the Xiao clan, where Xiao Yan came from, was already at its limit. The Shi clan was also aware that the immigrants they sent were all branches of the Shi clan. These branch families originally had a lower status in the Shi clan, but now they benefited from it and hitched a ride on the Xianmen realm. The vigorous development of the Xianmen realm provided a strong guarantee for Xianmen Tianzong's own development. Large amounts of resources were supplied to Xianmen Tianzong. However, in terms of population, they still needed a longer period of reproduction to reach a sufficient scale. Lin Feng had done some tests and found that the flow of time in the Xianmen realm was actually different from that of the colossal world. The overall flow of time in the Xianmen realm was about 4 times faster than that of the colossal world. 1 year in the colossal world was equivalent to 4 years in the Xianmen realm. Even so, it would still take a long time for the population to reproduce. Lin Feng wasn't in a hurry. He stayed on Mount Yujing and taught the existing disciples in the sect while trying to figure out his own Dao arts. It was the same for Xiao Yan and the others. Compared to Lin Feng, who stayed on Mount Yujing, the few of them often went down the mountain for a stroll. On one hand, they could increase their knowledge and experience, and on the other hand, they could travel the world and search for some talented disciples to bring back to Mount Yujing, further expanding the sect's talent pool. Time passed by slowly. Soon 3 years had passed in the outside world. Many forces in the human cultivation world in the Divine Land suddenly discovered that the legendary Xianmen Tianzong had suddenly become quiet in recent years. Although no one dared to ignore it as it dominated Kunlun, it was not the focus of the Divine Land almost all the time like it was in the beginning. It was no longer showing off, but a deep and majestic momentum of an eternal foundation was quietly accumulating and gradually taking shape. What many small and medium-sized forces were concerned about was that not only Xianmen Tianzong, but also the superforces such as the Qin dynasty and the Great Zhou dynasty, were also quiet in recent years. Xianmen Tianzong and other forces formed a united front to target Taishu Temple. However, there seemed to be a tacit understanding between the United Front and Taishu Temple. Although they were vaguely opposed, after the Battle of West Hill City, no one rashly stirred up trouble. Mount Shu Sword Sect, which was at odds with Xianmen Tianzong and had an even sharper conflict, was also content with the status quo, as if all the previous grievances did not exist. Compared to the days of Xianmen Tianzong's strong rise, the tone of the past 3 years could be described with one word: But when people with discerning eyes looked at the calm divine land, they were actually anxious. They all smelled a different atmosphere, like the last calm before the storm. On Mount Yujing, as one of the giants of the divine land, Lin Feng naturally had a clearer grasp of the overall situation of the past 3 years than those who were looking at flowers through fog. However, his mind was calm, and his attention was focused on another matter: planting flowers and trees. Chapter 647. Lin Feng stood calmly in the dark heaven timeless cave. In front of him was a 3-legged cauldron. The cauldron was engraved with images of mountains and rivers. It was as if thousands of miles of mountains and rivers were carved in metal. It was the magic treasure of the mountain and river lord of the past, the Void Mountain and River Cauldron. Around the Void Mountain and River Cauldron, there were 9 small bronze cauldrons. They formed a formation, but they did not surround and protect the Void Mountain and River Cauldron in the center. After the 9-child and mother bronze Void Cauldron was gathered, it immediately showed a difference. Although it was 9 yuanying magic treasures, after forming a formation, it faintly formed a strange resonance with the Void Mountain and River Cauldron, which was a primordial soul magic treasure. The formation formed by the 9-child and mother bronze Void Cauldron stimulated a strange and unique power, shaking the void. Seeing this, Lin Feng knew that what Qiao Wei said was true. The 9-child and mother bronze Void Cauldron was indeed not refined by the mountain and river lord. On the contrary, although they were 9 yuanying magic treasures, they were not magic treasures. In fact, the formation formed by the 9 cauldrons was the key to the mountain and river lord's primordial soul Tao. The Void Mountain and River Cauldron was a magic treasure that he refined after he reached the primordial soul realm. However, the power of the two was vaguely of the same origin. Although there were differences, they could also resonate and faintly complement each other, helping each other. When the two were combined, the 10 cauldrons formed a brand new formation. It broke through the void, and indeed led to a path that seemed to be there. Lin Feng flicked his finger, and a stream of green water flowed into the Void Mountain and River Cauldron. In the 3-legged cauldron, there was a strange tree growing at the moment. The roots of the tree went deep into the Void Mountain and River Cauldron. The roots and the lower half of the tree trunk were as red as fire, emitting an extremely high temperature. There were even flames jumping on the roots and trunk from time to time, but it did not hurt the tree at all. Bathed in the fire, the life force of the tree became stronger. However, looking up, the upper half of the tree trunk and the branches and leaves were ice blue, as if it was in the middle of winter. It was covered in snow and frost. Even the leaves seemed to be formed from ice crystals. This was Lin Feng's frigid ice cornucopia. After planting and cultivating it, it had grown into a faded firewood. This tree was special. It was very difficult to cultivate and grow, and its growth was extremely slow. Even the heavenly luck spirit soil had a limited effect. Lin Feng had spent a lot of effort to cultivate this tree and grow it to its current size. The karmic fire tree continued to grow. Its branches extended upwards, passing through the 10 cauldron formation's passageway, all the way to the outer realm. It was like a bridge that spanned the heavenly moat. Lin Feng took a step forward, passing through the branches of the karmic flame tree and heading deeper into the void, following the path that had been pointed out. As he walked, Lin Feng suddenly felt that something was wrong. Such a powerful realm power. It feels like it only exists between the vast land of the divine continent and the infinite wasteland. Could it be that this path leads to the demon world's infinite wasteland? The feeling of the two worlds clashing against each other gradually disappeared, and the passageway came to an end. Lin Feng tore open the void and looked over, only to see an ancient desolate mountain range. After carefully sensing the flow of spirit qi here, Lin Feng had an idea. It's not the infinite mainland. Instead, it's sandwiched between the divine land and the infinite mainland. A gap was formed due to the compression, but it eventually expanded into an outer realm space. However, I'm not the first person to step foot into this outer realm space. Lin Feng frowned slightly. His figure moved and he stopped again. He was already deep in the mountain range. Standing in the sky, Lin Feng looked down. There was a faint cyclone in the mountain range, leaping like a black hole. Lin Feng pointed at the cyclone, and it dissipated rapidly. Lin Feng raised his brows. Interesting. A cloud of purple gas rapidly surged out, wrapping around the cyclone that was about to dissipate. Lin Feng carefully felt the energy fluctuations within, his expression becoming slightly more serious. The heavenly charm, great sage, have you already grasped a bit of it? In the Battle of West Hill City, Lin Feng had joined forces with the Great Qin, Great Zhou, Purple Heaven Dao, Northern Militant Royal Court and other factions to stand against Taishu Temple and remove the Heavenly Pool sect from the territory of the Divine Land. In the end, Taishu Temple remained silent. The reason was actually because of the unusual movements of the demon realm in the Infinite Mainland. Many demons in the Infinite Mainland who were originally in seclusion became restless. Ever since the war between the two worlds, the scale was unprecedented. Even some powerful demons who did not participate in the war between the two worlds suddenly became active. Ever since the war between the two worlds, compared to the human cultivation world, the battles between the demons were more intense. This caused the overall strength of the demons to recover more slowly. However, this was under the situation where many of the demons that had always been in seclusion were excluded. Now that these great demons had reappeared in the world, it instantly increased the pressure on the humans. Therefore, this situation immediately attracted the attention of Taishu Temple. When Lin Feng and the rest received the news, they were also rather concerned. There were signs that the enchantress, who had snatched a portion of Yudu Minghua in the Cloud Forest world, could use his own cultivation of the primordial demon canon, and Yudu Minghua to deduce the first volume of the Heavenly Dao Demon Scripture, and even the marvel of the entire Heavenly Dao Demon Scripture. Heavenly Dao Demon Scripture was the supreme cultivation method of the demon race. The enchantress could just rely on the second volume of the primordial demon canon to roam Heaven Wasteland, and be known as the head of the 10 saints of the demon race. Ever since Yuhuang Tianhai had fallen and the Yudu race had gone missing, the complete Heavenly Dao Demon Scripture was declared lost. The most mysterious first volume, especially, had been completely buried without a trace. If the enchantress could reproduce the complete Heavenly Dao Demon Scripture, no matter if it was the Divine Land or Heaven Wasteland, it would be a violent earthquake. The influence would be far-reaching, no inferior to the sudden rise of Xianmen Tianzong. The scene of Yuhuang Tianhai shattering Great Thunderclap Monastery's creation treasure, Mount Meru, despite being besieged by the Haotian Mirror and Immortal Heaven Sword, flashed in the minds of the strong practitioners of the human race who had survived that battle, and it made them shudder. The reason why the alliance led by the celestial sect of Xian and the Void Temple had been at peace for the past few years was, to a large extent, because both sides had placed their attention on the vast Heaven Wasteland. The possibility of the Heavenly Dao Demon Scripture reappearing stimulated the demon race more than the human race. The great demons naturally weren't willing to be inferior to humans. They all eyed the Heavenly Dao Demon Scripture covetously, but they were even more wary of the human race. At that moment, between the Divine Land and Heaven Wasteland, it was like an active volcano that was about to erupt. The temporary calm was only accumulating power, indicating an even more violent eruption. Lin Feng was in this foreign dimension and intercepted the cyclone. He carefully sensed the changes in the demonic power, and it was vaguely similar to the demonic power of the enchantress. Through the concept of power, Lin Feng could be sure that the enchantress's power had increased compared to before. However, she should only be at the beginning of deriving the complete version of the Heavenly Dao Demon scripture. As time passed, her progress would definitely increase until she finally succeeded. His previous guess was confirmed. The enchantress didn't have hope of reproducing the Heavenly Dao Demon scripture. She had already made substantial progress. It was no wonder that the enchantress had disappeared. She must have hidden herself and gone into seclusion to seek a greater breakthrough. This foreign dimension was actually a place where she had gone into seclusion. It's a pity that I can't strike first. Lin Feng thought to himself. You're preparing, so am I. You need time, so do I. Let's see who's faster. Lin Feng waved his hand and guided the power aura of the 10 cauldrons array on Yujing Mountain into this foreign dimension. Immediately, the mountain range flashed with light. The enchantress only discovered this place by accident. She felt that it was rather hidden, so she stayed for a few days to cultivate before leaving. However, she didn't have the 10 cauldrons array, so she couldn't discover the true mysteries of this foreign dimension. Lin Feng looked at the flashing light in the mountain range and thought to himself, Ding of Shenzhou isn't here. However, just like the enchantress, Ding of Shenzhou had stayed in this foreign dimension before. Forming hand seals with both hands, Lin Feng used his dermic powers to further stimulate the light. The light immediately turned into a light illusion. Stars shone in the light illusion as if the stars were right in front of them. Seeing this, Lin Feng was quite surprised. This is the desolate ancient star ocean? The desolate ancient star ocean was a vast foreign dimension similar to the void space battlefield. It was independent of the major thousand worlds, but it was not a pure medium-class world. This foreign dimension was extremely mysterious. It was directly connected to the vast universe and the dazzling stars. In the desolate ancient star ocean, it was easier to absorb and refine the power of the stars than anywhere else. It was even easier to refine the entire star. In the primordial era, this was the paradise of the demon race. Later on, the human race rose and produced many experts. During the reign of the Grand Emperor, the primordial era ended. The human race and the demon race lived separately in the divine land and infinite wasteland. The desolate ancient star ocean fell into the hands of the human race and became the territory and residence of the human race's sacred emperors. Until the end of the primordial era, when the ruthless sovereign was overthrown, the human race's strength was greatly reduced. The demon race took the opportunity to start another war between the two worlds and took back the desolate ancient star ocean. After the last sacred emperor of the demon race died in the Yuhuang Heavenly Sea, there were no more sacred emperors of the demon race. Therefore, the few realm passageways that led to the desolate ancient star ocean were divided and occupied by the most powerful forces of the demon race. After the great sage of the demon race reached the second level of the undying demon soul, the primordial true spirit level, he had to start refining the power of the stars into his body, and finally reach the third level of the undying demon soul. The star soul is one level. After reaching the star soul as one level, he could still refine more stars into his undying demon soul. Therefore, to the demon race, obtaining the desolate ancient star ocean was extremely beneficial. After the primordial era, the human race had always wanted to take back this place but had never succeeded. For the human race, the power of the stars was also the top power in the world. If they could obtain it, it would be extremely beneficial. Lin Feng looked at the shining starlight in the illusion of light and shadow and muttered to himself. So that's how it is. The disappearance of Ding of Shenzhou is actually related to the desolate ancient star ocean. He carefully analyzed the illusion of light and shadow. This illusion of light and shadow was created by Ding of Shenzhou's divine art magic power. It isn't a real realm passageway that leads to the desolate ancient star ocean. However, through this illusion of light and shadow, the divine arts practitioners have the ability to open a path for themselves. Even if I'm not in a hurry to open it now, I can still receive the starlight in it to cultivate. It has endless uses. Lin Feng pondered for a moment and thought to himself, there's a lot of room for maneuvering in here. He controlled the 10 cauldrons formation to temporarily seal the illusion of light and shadow. Then he returned to Jade Capital Mountain and temporarily cut off the path. He summoned Xiao Yan and the other direct disciples to him. Spread the word that our sect will be accepting disciples for the third time in a few days. At the same time, we will be holding the first internal competition of the sect, and inviting the people of the same Dao to come and watch the ceremony. All of you, go down the mountain now and set up a few locations to accept disciples. Then bring them back to the mountain together. Chapter 648. The news that Xianmen Tianzong was accepting disciples for the third time spread throughout the Divine Land in a very short period of time, once again shocking the world. The opening of the mountain gate this time was also different from the previous 2 times. Lin Feng sent Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi and the others out, each occupying a place and separately recruiting people to become disciples, and then bringing them back to the mountain together. In this way, Xianmen Tianzong's prestige was more far-reaching and more intuitive, which made it more convenient for those who wanted to be his disciples to come to him. Lin Feng chose several places carefully. He didn't poach too many people from friendly forces, but he didn't deliberately avoid them either. Although he had been low-key in recent years, no one would ignore the power of Xianmen Tianzong. Lin Feng also ordered Xiao Yan and the others to send invitations to all the experts in the Divine Land to Kunlun Mountain to attend the ceremony. The place set up by Zhu Yi was located in the territory of the Great Zhou Dynasty, close to the mountain gate of Purple Cloud Path. He was also responsible for the invitation of these 2 forces. Dao Master Lan Ting of Purple Cloud Path received Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi handed him Lin Feng's letter. After receiving the letter, Dao Master Lan Ting passed it to Dao Master Lei Yun. Dao Master Lei Yun took the letter and read it. He raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "Senior brother Lan Ting, it seems that I have to go to Kunlun Mountain in person." Not only Dao Master Lei Yun, but all the big shots who received the letter were also moved. Almost all of them made the decision to go to Kunlun Mountain to attend the ceremony. Although it was said to be a ceremony, everyone knew in their hearts that this was a meeting led by the Celestial Sect of Wonders. After the battle in West Hill City, Xianmen Tianzong's reputation reached a new peak. In the camp against the Taishu Temple, he vaguely occupied a leading position. After that, Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong chose to develop steadily and no longer continue to be in the limelight. However, now that Lin Feng had issued an invitation for the first time, the major forces still responded one after another. Moreover, almost all of them were led by major figures. The alliance meeting this time was bound to be huge, and its influence would be far-reaching. However, in addition to the giants, the outstanding descendants of the younger generation of the major forces also followed their seniors to Kunlun Mountain. This time, aside from accepting disciples, Xianmen Tianzong would also hold a competition among their disciples. At the same time, they would invite the young disciples of other factions to exchange pointers and learn from each other. The nature of the competition was similar to that of the Barren Sea Assembly. For the other forces, this was a rare opportunity. Everyone wanted to see if the younger disciples of Xianmen Tianzong were equally outstanding. Lin Feng's direct disciples, Xiao Yan and the others, were already well known and recognized as the most outstanding young talents in the Divine Land. Their limelight had even overshadowed the Taishu Temple, which was known as the gathering place of geniuses. However, if a sect wanted to prosper for a long time, it couldn't just rely on one generation. Instead, it had to rely on the joint efforts and inheritance of several generations. Therefore, this time everyone wanted to see the standard of the younger disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. Could they guarantee that the reputation that Xiao Yan and the others had built would not decline? Over the past 3 years, Xianmen Tianzong's direct disciples had left Yujing Mountain from time to time. They left the Yunfeng Mirror Lake and went to other places to train. Some went to the Xiantian realm in their own backyard, and some went to other regions. Some even left Xianmen Tianzong's traditional territory and went to the Kunlun mountain range. The direct disciples of Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others, such as Lu Xiaofeng, Su Yinsheng, and Li Xingfei, had also gradually gained fame and never suffered losses. However, the other major factions such as the Qin dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, the Reincarnation sect, and even the descendants of Mount Shu Sword sect and Taishu Temple, had never come into contact with them. Therefore, the strength of the second-generation disciples of Xianmen Tianzong was still a mystery to the outside world. This grand ceremony was undoubtedly a very good opportunity. It was an opportunity for Xianmen Tianzong and the other factions. Everything depended on whether the younger disciples of Xianmen Tianzong had real skills. If they had real skills and did not tarnish the reputation of their predecessors, it would make the reputation of Xianmen Tianzong even more resounding in the divine land. Xianmen Tianzong would no longer be a newly established sect supported by Lin Feng and a few other disciples. Instead, it would truly have the aura of a holy land. If they did not have real skills, it would not really damage the reputation of Lin Feng and the others. However, for the overall reputation of Xianmen Tianzong, there was no doubt that it would be a setback. It would cause Xianmen Tianzong, which had been on the rise, to suffer a slight setback. Of course, Lin Feng himself was very clear about the stakes involved. However, his current state of mind had gradually changed, and he did not care too much about it. When a sect was newly established, people's hearts were not stable. Because of the brilliant achievements of Lin Feng and his disciples, the younger disciples were naturally excited and full of morale. However, it was inevitable that there would be some impetuosity, and even arrogance would spread. Lin Feng even heard arguments such as Shu Mountain is nothing, and the disciples of Taishu Temple are only fit to carry our shoes from the new foundational disciples, which made him not know whether to laugh or cry. It was good to have confidence, but confidence without strength would be a joke. This was also a hurdle that all newly established sects had to go through. When the seniors established the country and everything went smoothly, the younger generation often became arrogant. However, once they suffered a setback, they might not be able to recover. They would doubt themselves and blindly worship the outside world. To develop a bearing that would not be affected by honor or disgrace, it required both strength and experience. Lin Feng was not interested in raising a group of spoiled brats. He was protective, but the premise was that the disciples in his sect had to live up to his expectations. Increasing communication with the outside world would allow the younger disciples to broaden their horizons, so that they would not be frogs at the bottom of a well. It would also be good for their current and future growth. Of course, although that was the case, the threshold for Lin Feng to accept disciples had always been high. The overall level of the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong was still very top-notch. The total potential of the second-generation disciples was around 25, and there were even many who were above 25. Coupled with the improvement of the Heaven Spirit replenishing pill, the superior cultivation environment and sufficient resources on Jade Capital Mountain, and the strong support of the Taoist techniques of Xianmen Tianzong, in the entire world of human cultivators, their innate quality and acquired environment were very outstanding. Even young cultivators with the same potential would find it difficult to beat the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. However, there was always a possibility. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, this kind of son of heaven was indeed hard to find, but monstrous people like Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu who had a total potential of 30 or more in all four aspects. Even though they were rare to the point that they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns, it wasn't that they didn't exist. Wasn't Xiao Zhen'er an example? Although Shi Tianyi and Liang'an, the Marquis of Jinghuan, were inferior to Xiao Yan and the others, they might not be much worse than Yu Hongyan and the others. Shi Xingyun and Jiao Junchen were also outstanding talents who were suspected to have a total potential of 30. Of course, this was referring to talent. A person's true strength was related to many aspects. However, the existence of these people indicated that other forces could also have such outstanding people. Taishu Temple, Mount Shu Sword Sect, the Great Zhou, and the Great Qin all had strong enough conditions to ensure that these geniuses could be nurtured to the best of their abilities. Would Su Yunsheng, Ying Luozha, and the others be able to handle these people? Therefore, Lin Feng finally decided to invite the big shots of the various forces to attend the ceremony. At the same time, he also wanted them to bring their young talents to challenge them. He wanted to interact more with his own disciples, and help his own disciples wake up and broaden their horizons. Lin Feng sincerely hoped that the geniuses of the other forces could attend. This kind of clash between top-notch geniuses was also a kind of promotion for the growth of his own disciples. Moreover, Lin Feng's goal was to let his own disciples broaden their horizons. He did not really want them to go up and seek abuse. He wanted them to temper their hearts and not destroy their self-confidence. The purpose of finding a whetstone was to sharpen the blade, not to break it. If the other party really had people like Shi Tianyi, Liang'an, Shi Xingyun and Jiao Junshan, he also had people waiting here. After Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu, Lin Feng did not accept any more personal disciples. Xianmen Tianzong began to operate from top to bottom. Naturally, it would not let go of its own backyard, the Heaven Mystic Realm. 3 years in the boundless world was 12 years in the Heaven Mystic Realm. The first generation of immigrants had gradually grown up, and it was time to harvest. The Kunlun Mountains, which had been peaceful for a long time, became lively again. A group of Xianmen Tianzong true disciples scattered around the mountain range around the Yunfeng Mirror Lake to serve as receptionists. With the Mirror Lake as the center, Lin Feng designated a no-fly zone. Within a radius of 1,000 li outsiders could fly near, but it was strictly forbidden to travel through space or directly break through the void. This rule was already widely known. Although fellow Taoists were invited to come and watch the ceremony, this rule was not invalid. However, out of courtesy, the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong took the talismans and went 1,000 li away. They spread out in all directions, quietly waiting for the arrival of the guests, and then led them to the mountain gate at the Yunfeng Mirror Lake. Seniors and fellow Taoists, please follow me. I hope you will not blame me for my lack of manners. The northern militant First Chanyu personally came to the Kunlun Mountains. With him as the leader, a group of northern militant powerhouses were led by a purple-clothed young man to fly in the air toward the Yunfeng Mirror Lake. The purple-clothed young man was tall and handsome. His attitude was gentle, but he had a masculine and heroic aura. He flew with the magic power of the jade talisman in his hand. Although his cultivation was only at the late foundation establishment stage, he was neither servile nor overbearing when facing the northern militant First Chanyu and the others. Of course, the First Chanyu and the other powerhouses did not deliberately release their aura to oppress the purple-clothed young man. The purple-clothed young man led the guests near the Yunfeng Mirror Lake. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the void, and Zhu Yi, dressed in a purple robe and dressed like a scholar, stepped out. Disciple greets master. The purple-clothed young man hurriedly saluted. Zhu Yi nodded. Yinsheng, you go. Master will receive the First Chanyu's group. After finishing the recruitment work in the outside world, and sending the disciples back to the Kunlun Mountains, Zhu Yi and the others stayed at the Yunfeng Mirror Lake to receive the big shots like the northern militant First Chanyu. The purple-clothed young man was Su Yinsheng. He respectfully said, "Disciple obeys." After saluting the northern militant First Chanyu and the others, he left. He held the jade talisman in his hand and returned to his previous position. There were other Xianmen Tianzong disciples there. Seeing him come, they all greeted him. Senior apprentice Brother Su. Among the direct disciples, Su Yinsheng had cultivated to the late foundation establishment stage, and was one of the top figures. In the past 3 years in the boundless world, the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong had the help of the Universe Light Hall, so they had cultivated for more than 3 years. However, due to various reasons, it was impossible for Su Yinsheng and the others to spend the 3 years in the boundless world under the environment of 10 or 5 times the normal speed. Taking Su Yinsheng as an example, he had cultivated to the late foundation establishment stage in less than 8 years. No matter where he was, it was extremely efficient. Other than his own outstanding talent, the abundant spirit qi and cultivation resources on Yujing Mountain, as well as the mysterious Taoist techniques of Xianmen Tianzong, were all important reasons. However, Su Yinsheng had been stuck in the late foundation establishment stage for almost 2 years. Now the problem in front of him was core formation. This hurdle could not be seen simply by cultivating for a long time. Su Yinsheng saluted them back, but his eyebrows immediately furrowed. "Where is Ying Rosa?" Chapter 649. On the Cloud Peak, the people of the Northern Militant Imperial Court greeted Zhu Yi. Everyone's eyes fell on Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi was still dressed like a scholar, wearing a purple robe with a white robe. He had a gentle temperament and a calm gaze. He didn't deliberately reveal his cultivation level, but there was a faint light shining from the top of his head, attracting the 9 heavens clear qi into his body. He was already at the middle stage of the yuanying stage. Thinking of how he and his fellow disciples, Xiao Yan and Wang Lin, could kill a late-stage yuanying ancestor when they were at the late stage of the golden elixir, the other cultivators of the northern militant imperial court were shocked. Zhu Yi smiled faintly. "Everyone, please come with me. My master is on Yujing Mountain." Lin Feng received the northern militant first Chanyu and his entourage in the main hall of Yujing Mountain, the guests and host chatting happily. Compared to the Great Zhou dynasty and the Great Qin dynasty, Xianmen Tianzong had a closer relationship with the northern militant imperial court and Purple Heaven Dao. 3 years ago, the northern militant imperial court eradicated the Tianqi sect and pushed their own sphere of influence into the original territory of the Tianqi sect. In the end, they divided the power of the Tianqi sect with the Great Zhou dynasty. The Great Zhou dynasty mainly absorbed the remaining disciples of the Tianqi sect and didn't occupy much territory. The northern militant imperial court obtained most of the original territory of the Tianqi sect. In the past 3 years, the northern militant imperial court had also been recuperating and digesting their previous gains. The overall strength of the sect had steadily increased. Now for the northern militant imperial court, the only flaw was that the left virtuous prince had fallen under the claws of the ancient Kuan-Peng in the Arctic Ice Sea. The loss of a primordial spirit powerhouse still hadn't been made up for yet. After all, it was difficult to form a primordial spirit. It required both time and opportunity. However, after the northern militant imperial court absorbed the remaining power of the Tianqi sect, the number of yuanying stage powerhouses had greatly increased. This could also be regarded as increasing the probability of a primordial spirit powerhouse appearing. Creating primordial spirit powerhouses from these yuanying cultivators was actually one of the aspects of the northern militant imperial court, digesting the fruits of the war. However, compared to other digesting, this would take more time. The northern militant first Chanyu looked at Lin Feng and slowly said, "Sect Master Lin, I agree with your view on the matter mentioned in your letter." Lin Feng nodded. "This is an opportunity. We need everyone to work together." After the meeting, the northern militant Great Chanyu's group descended Jade Capital Mountain and rested on the cloud peak. All the visitors and their daily living accommodations were arranged on the cloud peak. Aside from the residences of the disciples who laid the foundation, there were also guest residences that had long since been set up. After sending off the northern militant royal courts group, Lin Feng sat cross-legged in the All Heavens Great Hall. Suddenly, his eyes flashed and he looked up in a certain direction. His vision pierced through the layers of void and reached the Kunlun mountain range. Amidst the mountains, Su Yunsheng frowned slightly and walked forward. The welcoming work in this direction was the responsibility of the Qiantian Palace's disciples, and Ing Rosa was naturally among them. During the previous welcoming sessions, Su Yunsheng had noticed Ing Rosa's gaze when he looked at the disciples of other sections. He seemed to be eager to try them out. Now that Ing Rosa had disappeared, and considering Ing Rosa's past behavior, Su Yunsheng had sufficient reason to worry that he might have a conflict with the other guests. However, Su Yunsheng soon discovered that compared to Ing Rosa, he was the one who encountered trouble first. Walking through the mountain ridge, Su Yunsheng suddenly felt something and stopped. He looked at the mountain peak in front of him, and saw a few figures appear on the mountain peak. They were all wearing gold-rimmed robes and had an awe-inspiring aura. Su Yunsheng looked at the other party's attire and had an idea. The successor of the reincarnation sect's heavenly Tao. The reincarnation sect was split into the 6 paths of reincarnation, and they were constantly at war with each other. However, the most powerful and most likely to unify the reincarnation sect was the heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao had always been known as the number 1 of the 6 paths of reincarnation. In the internal conflicts of the reincarnation sect, the other paths would always join forces to resist the heavenly Tao. The 6 paths each had their own strengths. The Azura path specialized in physical cultivation, the Hell path specialized in array formations, The human path specialized in mental cultivation, the animal path specialized in taming spirit beasts, and the hungry ghost path specialized in controlling ghosts. Meanwhile, the heavenly Tao was proficient in many of the reincarnation sect's secret techniques. Its overall strength was very strong in all aspects. The reincarnation sect's heavenly Tao was also on the invitation list for this time's opening ceremony of Xianmen Tianzong. Su Yunxing observed these reincarnation heavenly Tao cultivators, and their gazes also landed on Su Yunxing, sizing him up. One of the cultivators, who looked to be in his 30s and was in the golden elixir period, said, "We are from the reincarnation sect. Are you a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong?" Su Yunxing cupped his hands. "I am Xianmen Tianzong's disciple Su Yunxing. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Are you here to attend our opening ceremony?" A tall and thin cultivator, who was also in the late stage of foundation establishment realm like Su Yunxing, sized Su Yunxing up and suddenly asked, "You are Su Yunxing?" Su Yunxing's expression did not change, but he sighed in his heart. As expected, the tall and thin cultivator turned to the cultivator of the golden elixir period and said, "Master, this is the person who injured junior brother Su in a fight." He said his name was Su Yunxing. Su Yunxing's heart sank the moment he recognized the other party. It happened a year ago. He had left the mountain to train, and encountered a disciple of the reincarnation sect's heavenly Tao in the southern foothills of Kunlun Mountain. Su Yunxing found a spirit herb first, and the other party tried to snatch it. In the end, the two of them fought and the other party was injured. Su Yunxing had already shown mercy, or else he would have killed the other party on the spot. For a spirit herb, some words caused a conflict, and it led to a tragedy. I am also very sorry. Seeing the gaze of the golden elixir period cultivator, Su Yunxing said calmly, "However, your sect's disciple attacked first. Forgive me for not being able to stretch out my neck to be chopped off." The golden elixir period cultivator looked deeply at Su Yunxing and said, "My disciple's skills are not as good as others, so there is nothing more to say. We are naturally here to watch the ceremony, but we also hope to have an exchange with Xianmen Tianzong." Speaking up to this point, the golden elixir period cultivator suddenly changed the topic. "A chance encounter is not as good as an invitation. Since we have met, let's have a spar." Du Ting, the tall and thin cultivator beside him, immediately replied, "Yes, master." Without asking if Su Yunxing agreed, he directly descended from the mountain peak and arrived in front of Su Yunxing. He smiled and said, "Junior brother Su's cultivation is very sloppy. Let me spar with you." Beside the golden elixir period cultivator, another disciple asked hesitantly, "Elder Meng?" The golden elixir period cultivator called Meng Bei said faintly, "Let's test the strength of Xianmen Tianzong's disciple. When we reach their territory, the method of the spar is still uncertain. This place is the fairest place." Su Yunxing looked at the tall and thin Du Ting in front of him, then looked at Meng Bei on the mountain peak. He frowned slightly. "This Taoist brother. Are you allowed to call him Taoist brother?" Du Ting, who was in front of him, smiled and said, "My master has already formed his gold core for more than 100 years. If you are also a golden elixir period cultivator, then there is no harm in calling him Taoist brother. Otherwise, just obediently call him senior or martial uncle." As he spoke, Du Ting suddenly felt a chill all over his body. It was as if a vicious wolf was staring at him from behind, and it could pounce on him and bite his throat off at any time. A layer of goosebumps appeared on the skin on Du Ting's throat, as if someone was holding a knife to his neck. Meng Bei, who was on the mountain, snorted coldly and looked at another mountain peak. Only then did Du Ting and the others react. They looked at the mountain together, and saw a young man who was dressed the same as Su Yunxing, but had a dark and thin appearance. He was sitting lazily on a big tree. He was holding the blade of a short knife in his right hand, and he was holding it upside down as if he was about to throw it. At this moment he was holding the knife in front of him. He narrowed one of his eyes and stared at Du Ting, who was at the foot of the mountain, as if he was taking aim. Du Ting subconsciously swallowed his saliva. He could clearly feel the killing intent that the other party did not conceal at all. The chilling feeling that he felt as if a knife and an axe were placed on his neck came from the gaze of the dark and thin young man. You are also a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong. You are a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong, so how can you be so rude? Du Ting was a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator, so he quickly composed himself and glared at Su Yunxing and the dark and thin young man. The dark and thin young man was Ying Luoza, who was also a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator, like Su Yunxing. When he heard Du Ting's question, he smiled nonchalantly. Su Yunxing looked up at Du Ting with a slightly cold gaze and said indifferently, I call your master brother out of courtesy, not because I want to talk to him as an equal. He and Ying Luoza were both direct disciples of Zhu Yi, so they could be considered as Lin Feng's direct disciples. Although Meng Bei had formed his core, he could only be considered a junior disciple in the reincarnation sect. Not to mention his master and grandmaster. Even his great-grandmaster and great-grandmaster were still alive. After all, a Yuanying cultivator could live up to 3,600 years, and a golden elixir period cultivator could live up to 1,000 years, not to mention a nascent soul cultivator, who naturally had an unlimited lifespan. Xianmen Tianzong had not been established for long, so it did not have many junior disciples. However, strictly speaking, Su Yunxing and Ying Luoza were the standard juniors. With Lin Feng's current status, it was not enough for Meng Bei to call them uncle masters. At the very least, he had to call them granduncle masters. On one hand, Su Yunxing and the others' cultivation levels were indeed low. On the other hand, they were from different sects and were not very close, so there was no need to use seniority. Therefore, Su Yunxing called Meng Bei brother to avoid awkwardness. After all, Meng Bei had cultivated for much longer than him. If he was a Yuanying ancestor, it would be more appropriate to call him senior. Du Ting's face instantly turned red when Ying Luoza aimed at him with a throwing knife and Su Yunxing's words. Meng Bei's gaze turned slightly cold. His gaze moved between Su Yunxing and Ying Luoza, and he slowly said, We are from different sects, so there is no need to use seniority. In the path of cultivation, there is no seniority. In the end, everything still has to be done. Empty words will only make people laugh. Du Ting, you should ask the disciple of the celestial sect of wonders for some divine abilities. Du Ting said in a deep voice, Yes, master. Then he put his palms together. Boundless golden light flashed and quickly condensed into a light disk, which directly shot toward Su Yunxing. Chapter 650. Du Ting's magic power condensed into rays of golden light and turned into a disk. As the disk rotated, 6 rays of golden light spread out and rotated with the disk like a saw. These 6 rays of light were not meant to cut the opponent's body or spiritual energy, but to cut the opponent's soul. Ying Luoza laughed and jumped down from the mountain. Su Yunxing stopped him. Don't do it. You don't know how to control your strength. As he spoke, Su Yunxing made a hand seal, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered together. It instantly turned into a ray of light and shot straight at Du Ting's disk. 8 laws of heaven and earth, penetrating heavens and earth. The light flashed and directly pierced through Du Ting's disk. Du Ting himself and Meng Bei and the others on the mountain were all stunned. Lin Feng, who was on Yujing Mountain, saw this scene and shook his head with a smile. In the past 3 years, there were foundation disciples who passed the test and became true disciples. Lin Feng and his disciples were strict with the test, but the number of true disciples had gradually increased. Through their own hard work and the time acceleration effect of the Universe Hall, a considerable number of true disciples had successfully opened their Sea of Qi and built their Tao foundation. Among them, there were also outstanding talents like Su Yunxing and Ying Luoza who had cultivated to the middle or late stage of foundation building. The foundation disciples cultivated the 8 trigrams Taoist canon of Yi and had a basic Qi cultivation. After laying a solid foundation for their Tao techniques, the younger generation of disciples naturally began to dabble in learning all sorts of divine arts. On one hand, Shaoyan Zhu Yi and the rest imparted their own paths, techniques and divine abilities to their disciples. On the other hand, they also started to gather together, working together to forge the sect's basic divine abilities and techniques, perfecting them. They lowered the difficulty of cultivating the divine arts and ensured that most disciples could cultivate it. At the same time, their power was maximized. In a sense, such divine arts could also be seen as Xianmen Tianzong's signature divine arts and divine arts. Of course, this was referring to the low-level ones. Xiao Yan and his fellow disciples kept on polishing and getting rid of the impurities while retaining the essence, and they had some impressive results. The spell that Su Yunxing just cast, penetrating heavens and earth, was the fourth of Xianmen Tianzong's 8 laws of heaven and earth. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi and the others used Zhu Yi's E-Sword Path divine ability, the 2 divine abilities of heaven and earth discord and earth-sky peace as the basic framework. Then they extracted parts of the mysteries of the 8 trigrams collapse, unlimited wind and thunder, all things follow the heart, Tai-Yin curse, void-destroying God spear and many other kinds of divine abilities and merged them, finally concluding them into the 8 divine abilities. Because of the consideration of reducing the difficulty of cultivation, it was not as profound and sharp as the E-Sword Dao, 8 trigrams disintegration, infinite wind and thunder spells, but its power was also extremely good. It was the basic magical power of the Xianmen heavenly sect's disciples in the foundation stage, and almost every true disciple was happy to learn and master it. They were the basic divine arts of Xianmen Tianzong's foundation establishment cultivators, and almost every true disciple was happy to learn and master them. The heavenly wheel technique was created by compressing and condensing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth before shooting it out. Meng Bei and the others' eyelids twitched when they saw this. Although the heavenly wheel technique isn't very powerful, it was actually broken by Su Yunxing in one move. It looks so easy. Du Ting shook his head and pulled himself together. He looked at Su Yunxing with a solemn expression. He formed a seal with his left hand and pointed his right index finger at his forehead. A drop of blood appeared on his forehead. His right index finger touched the drop of blood, and then pointed at Su Yunxing. Immediately, a bloodline that flashed with a golden light pierced toward Su Yunxing. Su Yunxing's expression didn't change as he looked at the bloodline that was shot at him. He sharply noticed that the end of the bloodline was actually vibrating in the air. It was erratic, and his spirit sense couldn't accurately lock onto its position. Although he didn't know what the bloodline was used for, Su Yunxing couldn't take the risk and see what was so special about his opponent's divine art. He stomped on the ground and performed the escape technique of the 8 laws of heaven and earth, soaring heaven and earth to evade the blood thread attack. Then, as he opened and closed his palms, streams of transcendence energy shot out and condensed in the air without dispersing, turning into ropes one after another. The ropes crisscrossed, trapping Du Ting and the bloodline inside like a cage. The 5th of the 8 laws of heaven and earth, used one's magic power to control the situation and trap the opponent in an invisible cage, making them unable to move. Du Ting controlled the golden bloodline and pierced the ropes formed by Su Yunxing's magic power, instantly piercing through them. The ropes were pierced by the bloodline and started to gradually collapse. Su Yunxing's expression was calm. He replenished his mana and weaved new ropes, trapping Du Ting and the golden blood thread together. At the same time, a few ropes intertwined and wrapped around the golden blood thread. Then they suddenly tightened. Su Yunxing's rope immediately broke the bloodline. However, Du Ting pointed his finger again. With a flash of golden light, the bloodline returned to its original state and destroyed Su Yunxing's rope again. Su Yunxing came to a realization. The other party's Dharma spell was a little strange, but it was not a problem for him. The purple-clothed young man was multitasking. On one hand, he was controlling the heaven and earth divine art, and on the other hand, he was displaying the heaven and earth drawing finger art of the 8 laws of heaven and earth. Besides being born from Xianmen Tianzong's own Dao art, the finger the heavens and draw the earth had also fused slight profundities of the Buddhist sect's Vairocana scripture into it, causing it to be peerlessly overbearing, vast and grand, and it specialized in countering evil techniques. Freeze! Su Yunxing's right index finger drew a semicircle in the air and pointed at Du Ting's golden bloodline. His powerful mana instantly froze the bloodline in midair. Du Ting was shocked. Then he saw Su Yunxing's heaven and earth drawing finger art turn into ropes of mana and wrap around him. Now that he was wrapped up by Su Yinsheng, he was immediately captured by Su Yinsheng. Du Ting clenched his teeth and took out a flashing disc-shaped Dharma artifact, cutting off all the ropes of mana that were wrapping around him. It was a black flying wheel the size of a palm, with 9 curved sawteeth sticking out of its edge. Its name was Nine-Wing Soul-Shattering Flying Wheel, and it was a golden elixir period Dharma artifact. This Dharma artifact originally belonged to Meng Bei, and for safety's sake, he secretly gave it to Du Ting before the battle started. He had originally thought of using it in case of an emergency, but who knew that Du Ting was not Su Yunxing's match at all? In just a few rounds he was about to be captured alive. Meng Bei frowned. Even though Du Ting isn't the best among the foundation-building disciples in our sect, he's still a top-notch talent. But why is the gap between him and his opponent so big? Other than Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others, Xianmen Tianzong's junior disciples are also so outstanding? Du Ting was a little embarrassed and annoyed. He commanded the Nine-Wing Soul-Shattering Flying Wheel to make a turn in the air, turning it into a black light that slashed toward Su Yinsheng. Su Yunxing's Heaven and Earth scripture connected the ropes and turned them into a light screen to block the black light. The black light was blocked, and the original form of the Nine-Wing Soul-Shattering Flying Wheel was revealed. It didn't fly back, but kept spinning on the light screen, displaying the power of a golden elixir period Dharma artifact. Like a pair of scissors cutting a piece of cloth, it forcefully cut open the Heaven and Earth scripture. Seeing this, Lin Feng frowned slightly. If it was a real battle of life and death, then there was nothing much to say. Everyone would rely on their own abilities. Other than their own magic power and special abilities, they would use talismans, Dharma artifacts, psychological tactics, trickery, and everything else that they could use. It was fine as long as they could defeat or kill the enemy. But if it was a battle of exchanging pointers, then generally speaking, they wouldn't use any external items, and would only use their own magic power and special abilities to fight. Just like the Desolate Sea Assembly, it was like this. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any exchanging pointers. Instead, it would be a competition to see who had more resources. Or rather, it would be a competition to see who was more shameless. In a battle between foundation-building cultivators, a single Yuanying talisman could directly decide the result. Ying Luoza looked at Du Ting in disdain and sneered. I like opponents like you who don't follow the rules the most. As he spoke, he opened his right palm, and a ray of light flew into the air. It turned into a glazed light screen, and directly caught the Nine-Wing Soul-Shattering Flying Wheel. Seeing this, Su Yinsheng frowned slightly. Ying Luoza smiled nonchalantly. This will is not bad. I like this kind of attack-type Dharma artifact. The glazed light screen was completely transparent, and flashed with colorful rays of light. It was dazzling. From the outside, one could clearly see that the Nine-Wing Soul-Shattering Flying Wheel was flying around like a headless fly inside the light screen. It looked ferocious, but it still couldn't break through the light screen's defense. Du Ting, as well as Meng Bei and the others on the mountain, were all stunned. Du Ting's golden elixir period Dharma artifact was temporarily provided to him by Meng Bei, but the glazed light screen in front of them was also a golden elixir period Dharma artifact, and it belonged to Ying Luoza. Seeing that his Dharma artifact was caught by Ying Luoza, Meng Bei frowned. It's just in exchanging pointers. Why did you suddenly interfere? You've broken the rules. Why aren't you stopping now? Ying Luoza fearlessly looked at Meng Bei and grinned. Who was the one who broke the rules first? Although I don't really like this rule, it doesn't mean that I don't understand it. Or are you trying to fool? Meng Bei's face darkened. How dare you? As he spoke, he raised his palm and 5 streams of magic energy condensed above his head, turning into 5 elephant transformation realms. A golden longsword, a towering tree, a torrential wave, a raging fire, and a towering mountain. After the 5 elephant transformation realms were formed, they kept rotating. The 5 elements supported each other and strengthened each other. This stable 5 elemental reincarnation formed a huge whirlpool that continuously absorbed the 5 elemental spiritual energy in the surroundings. The speed at which it absorbed became faster and faster. The next moment, the 5 elemental reincarnation suddenly moved, and turned into a huge palm of magic energy that could be seen clearly by the naked eye. It was colorful and domineering. Heavenly Path 5 Elemental Palm. The huge palm of magic energy grabbed at the glazed light screen aggressively. Seeing this, Su Yunxing took out a greenwood staff and turned it into a towering tree that blocked Meng Bei's Heavenly Path 5 Elemental Palm, preventing it from descending. Du Ting and the others were stunned. Another golden elixir period magic item. Could it be that all the foundation building disciples of Xianmen Tianzong have their own golden elixir period magic item? Of course not, but outstanding people like Su Yunsheng and Ying Luoza had indeed been bestowed magic items by their master, Zhu Yi. Ying Luoza's hands changed hand seals. While the glazed light screen suppressed the nine-winged soul-shattering flying wheel, it also released a seven-colored light from time to help Su Yunxing's greenwood staff deal with Meng Bei. Ying Luoza's hands changed hand seals. While the glazed light screen suppressed the nine-winged soul-shattering flying wheel, it also released a seven-colored light from time to help Su Yunxing's greenwood staff deal with Meng Bei. But at this moment, a crack suddenly appeared in the void, and a white-robed old man walked out. The magic energy around him was terrifying. He was a Yuanying stage-old ancestor. He glanced at Su Yunsheng and Ying Luoza below and said indifferently, "It's easy to obtain magic items, but it's hard to find the Tao. It's hard to achieve great things by relying on external objects." As the white-robed old man spoke, he stretched out his hand and a strong suction force appeared, wanting to suck the greenwood staff and glazed light screen away. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.